Recording in progress.
Colleagues, I'm going to request that we start settling in at least by 20 past 5. Our meeting should be starting. Kindly request everybody to start coming in. Good evening, honorable members, stakeholders present with us today, the support staff. I think we can now start with our meeting. I don't know if the sound is okay because I keep on hearing myself somewhere at the background. Colleagues, we are gathered here today, as we all know, honorable members, that for the past few days or for the past 2 weeks, we have been we've been engaging different stakeholders like the FFC, the PBO, and SALGA regarding the 2024 budget adjustment proposals. Today is a continuation of the crucial process that we've been engaging on, and we'll be engaging different stakeholders to hear from their side and getting their submissions. And I also want to emphasize, honorable members, that all the submissions that will be made today are very crucial, and they will importantly contribute towards this process that we're embarking on, which is the process of budget. And taking note that only verbal submissions were not made, we also have written submissions that will be taken into consideration as we continue with the process. I am going to request Mr. Nodada to quickly take us through the apologies. After the apologies, we'll take introductions. After the introductions, I will guide the meeting on how we're going to go about today's process. Mr. Nodada.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good afternoon, honorable members. Honorable members, we did not receive any apologies. I don't see Mr. Khatebe here, but I assume because there was a house sitting just now, maybe he's still wrapping up issues on that side. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. And An apology from my side for not informing the Secretariat. Mr. Kadebe requested that he will be part of the meeting virtually as he has to go home and prepare for the burial of the aunt. So he'll not be with us physically, but virtually he'll be on the platform. I am Ms. Tidi Malole Khwase, a permanent delegate from the Northwest and also a chairperson on the Select Committee on Appropriations. Honorable Ndlovu.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Honorable Samin Kofu, a permanent delegate from Limpopo, chairperson of Finance Select Committee. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I'm Honorable Sylvia Ngumalo, permanent delegate from Mpumalanga, a member of this committee. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Matapelo Suez and Northern Cape.
Greetings all. Thank you very much, Chair. It's Honorable Machola from KwaZulu-Natal, a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dennis Ryder, member of the committee representing Gauteng, and I'm pleased to see some of you in person for the first time in a long time. I don't recognize Matthew without the flag behind him.
Good day, Honourable Chair. My name is Paul Swart, represent the Western Cape.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Henny Brits. I'm a member of Parliament in the NCOP. I represent the Eastern Cape, the province of Legends, and I'm also a member of this committee.
Comrade Matthew.
Afternoon, Chair, honourable members. My name is Matthew Parks from Cosatu, and Chair, it's good to see the Honourable Ryder so young in person. Thanks, Chair. But I brought my jacket just in case, because he wouldn't recognise me. Thanks.
In that order.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's Daniel McLaren. Also good to see some faces of people in person for the first time, after being on a few committee meetings. I'm a public finance economist at Ilifa Labantwana.
Good evening, honorable members. I am Elizabeth Baini, research specialist at Ilifa Labantwana.
Good evening, honorable members. I am Joyce Oba. I'm a senior campaigner at Amandla. Thank you for having us today.
Good evening, honorable members and everyone here. I'm Matsidi Solengwasa, and I'm a budget analyst at Section 27 and the chairperson of the Budget Justice Coalition. Thank you.
It's Matsidi Solengwasa, not Lekhwase. I see most of the members looking at my direction as you introduce yourself. You may go.
Good evening, honorable chair and honorable members. My name is Olorato Twaile, and I'm part of a team that comes from the National Treasury. We are responsible for the Division of Revenue, as well as the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
Good evening, Chair and everyone. My name is Ndamulelo Nechanane, an economist from National Treasury. I work closely with Olorato. Thanks.
Yes, good evening, Chair and honorable members. My name is Pino Mnyaga from National Treasury as well. Thank you.
Estelle.
Thank you, Chairperson. Estelle Grunewald, Committee Secretary.
Good evening, Olivia Cyprus, Committee Assistant.
Good evening all, Yolanda Brown, Research for the Committee.
Good evening, honored members and colleagues. My name is Lobabalo Notata. I'm the Committee Secretary.
Good evening, honorable members, colleagues. My name is Pelelani Dlomo. I'm a permanent Conning advisor for this committee.
Can we get an indication if there are any stakeholders on our virtual platform?
Not yet, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Yesterday, we got an indication that some of the stakeholders will not be able to fly to Cape Town physically. That is why we took a decision that maybe we turn today's meeting into hybrid. It's surprising that I see some of the stakeholders are not here, and they are also not on the virtual platform. But maybe when we continue with the meeting, they will shortly join in. Because I must say, colleagues, that as this committee, this is one of the committee that encourages public participation as part of democratizing the South African budget process. So we are a committee that encourages all the views to be brought before the committee before considering the process of the budget. I am going to request that we hit straight to the presentations so that we can allow members enough chance to can seek clarity where possible or where needed, or to engage with the presentations. Though today we know you are just making submissions, it's not necessarily for members to come and interrogate your presentations, but where they seek clarity, they'll be allowed to do so. And I'm going to request that we limit your presentation into 15 to 20 minutes to avoid prolonging with the deliberations of today's meeting. Without any waste of time, colleagues, we all know, and like I said from the very first time when we met, this is not the first public hearing as this committee. But today we are specifically dealing with the DORA, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. Therefore, I'm going to hand over to Ilifa Labantwana to start with the presentation. It will take 15 to 20 minutes, and I'm going to request members to kindly note whatever that you might want to ask, and then you'll take a round of questions when all presenters have made their presentations. Thank you very much. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and good evening, honorable members. Thank you for the opportunity to let us have our say on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. So for us, as a form of introduction, for those of you who might not be aware, Ilifa Labantwana were created in 2009 with a vision to secure an equal start for all children in the country through improved access to quality early childhood development. So our population of interest really are the young children of South Africa between the ages of 0 to 5, if we push it 6 maybe. We are very passionate, and we believe in the power of investment really in early childhood development, not only as a powerful tool to build human capital development, but an avenue to address some of the economic and gender inequalities that the country is facing. And so for us, we are concentrated on designing evidence-based solutions to improve and expand the sector, which we call ECD for short. And we premise our work on a very deep understanding of the socioeconomic challenges facing the country as a whole, but particularly for women and children as a vulnerable population. So our objective, one of our big objectives is to unlock a range of financial opportunities, and that will stimulate both economic growth and improve access for the country's children, and to obviously improve our society. We do this through research, advocacy, and partnership with government, civil society organizations, like some of our colleagues here, and the private sector. So the ECD ecosystem as a whole, it's not, we don't work in isolation or silos. For just so we are all on the same page, ECD for us is the period from conception to about 5 years old, when children are then of school-going age or about to enter the formal schooling system where there's more structured learning. And it is a very critical period in a child's life because that's where most of the developmental issues happen, right? So cognitive development, emotional development, social development happens. And through our research and our work, we've identified 5 crucial things or services that are interconnected and coordinate, if well coordinated, will develop a child holistically and get them ready to enter the formal schooling system. And these ones are premised on primary level maternal and child health care, nutritional support, social protection in the form of social assistance and cash support or financial support, early childhood learning and stimulation, and obviously care for the support for the caregivers of children themselves, because at that stage, their children are vulnerable and they can't be spokesperson for themselves and they can't do a lot of things for themselves. So, because of the nature of the stage of development, it's a life course perspective that we take, right? So, whatever happens at the very foundation or at that stage of their life follows them throughout their life. We believe that it has an impact on human capital development and human capital improvement. And so the skills, the knowledge, the health, whatever they accumulate at that stage follows them throughout. And that is why it is important for us to invest in those services and areas that support their development holistically before it is too late. Otherwise, we'll be playing catch up and obviously spending money and effort trying to plug holes later on in their life, let's say in high school or even in university or when they're trying to enter the labor market because of unemployment issues. So the individual human being, needs to be invested in. So the investment that we are asking for or we envisage is good for both the individual child, the family, the community, and the society as a whole. So what we are about to share with you on our views about the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill is not just about the child in isolation. It has snowballing or rippling effect for the communities, families, and society at large. And maybe as a sort of a way to make it, contextualize it more, it's like, why should we care about early childhood development in itself? And it's because we are saying that we have a lot of income inequalities that has not shifted since democratic dispensation, right? And as a society, we've got a really big problem with unemployment. So if we look at our labor market pyramid, we've got a really wide base on unemployment, and skills is, the skilled population is very skewed or very tiny compared to the unemployment area. And what we are trying to show, or what we want to convince honorable members today to take into consideration, is that proper and targeted interventions and investment at the ECD level will be able to, it's a catalytic and a cost-effective way to reshape the pyramid so that we shift people from the unemployed area to a more semi-skilled and skilled level on the pyramid. So I'm sure we are not, we all follow the news. Sometimes you see shocking statistics like 81% of grade 4 learners cannot read for meaning, and there's a moral panic. We lament and we are all aggrieved by this. But the problem is that the challenges start very early on, right? So before we can even get to talk about issues of children not being able to read for meaning, we have children, very young children, who are struggling. So we've got 70% of children living in dire poverty, which means that they live in households that do not have enough money to be able to meet their basic needs. This is problematic. We have children, 1 in every 5 children under 5 are stunted, And stunting, we have seen through research that that impacts on their cognitive, physical, emotional development that follows them throughout their lives. We've got a significant proportion, about 1.1 million children who are, like on the precept of being prepared for formal schooling, so to enter into grade R, who are not attending any early learning programs. That means they are not being stimulated and they are not prepared or ready to enter formal learning and education. So it is important that we protect children's rights, especially those ones outlined in the Constitution, sections 28 and 29, that deals with nutrition, healthcare, and other rights of that nature. Ours is not to say nothing is happening, but just to highlight some of the dire challenges that we are seeing in this vulnerable population, and for that address to happen. So there's a well-known sort of understanding in research in this area that the economic impact or investment of early childhood learning, right, has a lot more return on investment later on than any other. So what we spend on young children now is going to give back to us a lot more in the future as they go through life and society. So it is important that we pay attention to this critical area of development and this critical population of ours. Currently, we see that government expenditure on early learning, nutrition, and support for caregivers as a part of investment in early childhood development generally is not as high as, say, your social protection in terms of the child support grant, for instance, or the primary health spending. So that needs to be looked at. We have a lot of money and investment in the area of basic education and post-school education as compared to this specific area when it comes to early learning. But it is strange because for children or for people to progress to basic education and even higher education, they have to start from somewhere. And if we are under-investing or disinvesting at the very foundation, it is no wonder we have problems like kids not being able to read for meaning by the time they turn about 10. So we are saying that and what our modeling is showing us that incremental and well-targeted interventions is crucial and it's important. And as a way to also buttress the point is that if we do it well, we can drastically reduce child malnutrition and multidimensional child poverty. We can create more jobs for women, and we can also improve the skills and working conditions of women who are already working, and access to quality early childhood development services will free up some of the care burdens on women, especially because of the feminization of care work. And these women then will be available to be able to contribute positively to the labor market and also for their own economic development and upliftment. So this is essentially, I am painting a picture of why the human rights aspect of the bill as a tool for human rights transformation. We think this social context needs to be kept in mind when we are discussing the economic, the runs and cents of the discussion this evening. So I will give it over to my colleague to go through the economic in-depth numbers of the different parts of the bill.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks again, Chairperson. And yeah, I think just to, the last point on this slide is that where we have seen progress on child poverty since '94, it has been in those areas where there's been the most investment. So primary health care, maternal health care, we have some progress, but big investments into the public health sector have achieved that. And the child support grant has probably been the biggest poverty alleviation factor, which gets a lot of funding in the budget. But these aspects, early learning, nutrition, very, very little, only 4 billion a year. And so the presentation mainly focuses on those aspects. So what we're trying to talk about as Ilifa Labantwana is ECD really as an investment opportunity for the country. We can create jobs by investing in ECD. We can invest very progressively in township and rural economies. We can improve gender equity by giving children more access to play and early learning opportunities. So we want government and parliament to be thinking about ECD in its inclusive growth agenda for the GNU. And so we look at the Division of Revenue Bill and the MTBPS from that perspective. The MTBPS didn't speak to children in the budget speech. We read the 108-page document. It doesn't speak to children. It doesn't speak to what it's going to do in relation to early childhood development. When it comes to the kind of inclusive growth agenda, the President has been making commitments that early childhood development will get supported in the budget. But what we've seen in the budget is that while there is some additional support for the early childhood development grant, which I'll speak about, it's from an incredibly low base, and the ECD subsidy hasn't been increased since 2019. So the kind of political commitments are not getting backed up in the budget. And so the recommendation is that ECD should be one of the issues that the GNU drives over the next 5 years in the medium-term development plan. And that we set really ambitious investment and job creation and child outcomes targets to meet in that plan by 2030. In terms of the budget itself, we have seen a commitment to a primary budget surplus until 2030 by the Minister of Finance. So what that means is every year until 2030, we're going to raise more money in revenue than we're going to spend on public services. We're going to use the difference to pay down debt. That is a fiscal policy question for the Finance Committee, but where it hits the road in terms of the Division of Revenue Bill is the provincial equitable share not increasing with inflation and not increasing with the demand for services. So yes, we must find efficiencies and savings where we can in our budgets, and that's why we have 9 provincial treasuries to help us do that. But if we're getting more and more people in the system and prices are rising, then budgets also generally need to rise to keep up with that demand, and that's not happening, as I'll show you. And I mentioned the ECD subsidy is frozen at 17 Rand per child per day. So it's 3 years in a row where the provincial equitable share, until this year, has not kept pace with inflation. And when you factor in population growth around 1.4, 1.3%, that means more children are being born, but the budgets which our health, education, and social services departments have available are less on an annual basis for 3 years in a row. The Division of Revenue Bill proposes to increase the budget going forward with inflation, which is better, but the population growth still isn't factored in. So on a per capita or per person basis, we're still very, very stretched in the provincial budgets. And the effect of that we've seen is hiring freezes. So departments which in many cases need to fill posts are not able to do so, health departments included, social development departments included. And for the provincial education departments, we are, as I'll show, increasing spending on the ECD subsidy, but we're not increasing the capacity at the provincial level to actually manage that increased budget. So we're calling on Parliament to look at things like, I won't read all the slides because we're a bit behind on time, but one thing Parliament could focus on is the child rights impact assessments. If we're going to cut funding, if we're not going to increase it in line with prices of delivering services, there may be an impact on child rights, and something the executive can do is actually do a child's rights impact assessment of that decision, and we can maybe chat to the committee about what that entails. In terms of the conditional grant, we welcome the growth in this grant, and the caution really is on a couple of levels. The caution is firstly that with the pressure on the provincial equitable share, you can see the progress in the conditional grant actually reduced. So we see here for next year 352 million Rand increase in the conditional grant. But if the equitable share funding to subsidies, which fund early learning programs, goes down, then that's only 100 million or a 200 million Rand increase. So it eats away. And so we do need to focus on what is happening to the provincial equitable share budget. It's also, as Liz was saying, from a very low base, 4 billion Rand a year is all we're spending on these programs, and they're catering to 6 million children under 5. It's a very tiny amount of public funding that's provided. So we would argue for much, much more ambitious increases. And there's no commitment at the moment to increase the value of the subsidy. So at the moment, 17 Rand per child per day is all government provides to daycare and early learning programs to provide their services. And as a result, 90% of women in that sector earn below the minimum wage. The quality leaves a lot to be desired. Sanitation is a major issue, and we see all the developmental kind of impacts that has. So no adjustments were made to this grant. And I just want to show here, why we're calling for ambition. Good news is we have a strategy for ECD now. The DBE has put together a strategy. We have a strong director of ECD at the DBE. And that strategy is aiming for 800,000 more children in the early learning system by 2030 and 1.6 million more children receiving the ECD subsidy. So that's what it's going to take to meet the NDP goal of universal access to quality ECD. And the budget has to back that up. That is going to cost, we've done the sums to get us to universal access, about 19 billion Rand per annum. Just to put that into perspective, private households from the poorest 60% of households are already spending 15 billion Rand per annum on fees at care and early learning centres. So actually what you're asking for is the state to step up with an equal and slightly higher contribution by 2030, which I think is quite reasonable. And you can see what the targets we've set there for the increase in the value of the subsidy and the increase in the budget. On nutrition, just to flag to Parliament that there is this really important issue of this 197 million Rand allocation. It was made in 2023. It was supposed to be spent this year. There haven't been any plans put forward by the DB about how it's going to spend the money. And yet, as we've seen, there's a real crisis of child hunger, and there's 197 million Rand which we could be spending on feeding young children. And so we're trying to put pressure on the DB to explain what is going on, why isn't there a plan, and in the hope that this money won't be lost and returned to the Treasury. On the child support grant, basically the trend that we've observed is that the grant has moved further and further away from the food poverty line. So food prices have been increasing, but the child support grant hasn't been increasing at the same level. And so, if you go back 20 years, you could get more for your child support grant in terms of food than you can today. And that's a regression. And therefore, we're calling for the child support grant to be increased. And there's good data on this showing that if we increase that child support grant, we will actually make a dent in child poverty, and we can reduce child poverty by doing that. So that's something which we're calling for. When we talk about 71% of children living in poverty, that's below the upper bound Status A poverty line. And then just a final note on austerity measures. So I mentioned the commitment to the primary budget surplus. Yes, we have to stabilize debt, but at what cost are we doing that over the medium term? The social wage expenditure will only grow by 3.5%. That's the Treasury's own numbers. And so that's transport, housing, all growing below inflation and below the demand for services. And we're worried about what impact this will have on the GNU's ability to meet its goals. And again, just bringing attention to child rights is something we want to hear more about in the budget. Thank you, and sorry for pushing the time there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm going to request that, I've given you 25 minutes. I'm going to request that the next presenters do justice to your presentation, represent your presentation in as much as you want to, but do not go beyond the 25 minutes. Thank you very much. We can have Amandla Mobi.
Do you have a presentation?
No, these are just my notes. Do you need slides? Okay. Chair, can I start?
You may.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, we have submitted a written submission. So today I will be speaking to that. So I'll be mostly speaking from my notes and from the heart as well. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Close Oba and I work as a senior campaigner at Amandla.mobi. Amandla.mobi is a community organization that represents mostly the marginalized people in South Africa. And so we have members that it's almost 1 million of people who are our members. We are known as the organization that talks and works a lot on social grants, but actually we do a lot more work than that. We do work on health, we do work on food justice as well. We do work on anything that affects the marginalized, especially Black women in South Africa. Honorable members, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing us to come before you to present our opinions and recommendations on the MTBPS. I would also like to take this moment to commend this committee for extending the invitation. This is the first time something like this has ever happened, so we commend the committee for that, and we also commend the committee for consistently holding public hearings as well as for taking the demands seriously, because we have seen effort over the past years that we have done submissions to this committee that they have been taken seriously. In our presentation today, we would like to focus on 3 things. Of course, the Division of Revenue Bill, but also, honorable members, there are matters that I would like to bring to this committee about National Treasury as well as the Department of Social Development. And then we will also talk about the demands of the people and our recommendations to this committee. Honorable members of the committee and chairperson, many of us had hope that since the MTBPS would be the first under the government of national unity, maybe things would change and we would see more light and hope for the next financial year, especially for the marginalized majority in South Africa. However, we feel that Minister Godongwana and National Treasury have missed the mark and instead continued on the same trajectory of anti-poor budgeting.
I'm sorry to interject. May you kindly speak closer to the mic?
To the mic, okay, yes, of course. As I was saying, Honorable Chair, that we feel that the Minister has missed the mark. We feel that National Treasury have missed the mark because we had hoped that they would draw a clear picture of what the future would look like for people who live in deeper poverty in the country. Over the past years, it has been made very clear by various members of the society that Minister Godongwana's budgets are simply not working specifically for the marginalized. And in a very short space, we have seen those consequences. We have seen people getting pushed into deeper poverty. We have seen deaths of children due to hunger and malnutrition. Essential services such as health, such as education and social development have had budget cuts over the years, and they are currently critically underfunded. Our schools and hospitals lack the critical resources they need to thrive. The Division of Revenue Amendment Bill is simply a reflection of the austerity that happened in February and the years before. Although there have been some adjustments for very few budget allocations, it is important that we remind the government and this committee that the budgets that were allocated in the first place were never enough. Honorable members of the committee, the problems of this country are very clear and the solutions are clear too. For a long time, we have come to this committee to present not only the needs of the people, but we have also presented the very possible solutions. The people are at the receiving end of the services provided by the government, and so when they do provide feedback, but the government doesn't take that seriously, what are they to do? South Africa is experiencing a devastating poverty crisis right now, which needs to be urgently resolved. Many promises have been made about growing the economy so it creates and it sustains jobs, but we have not seen any significant changes around that. Very little has been achieved over the years to benefit people experiencing poverty through the budgets that have been tabled by Minister Godongwana in National Treasury. Instead, what we keep seeing is more opportunities created for the private sector to flourish. Honorable members, we all know that the private sector cares more about their profits than they do about the people. And it is saddening to see that Minister Godongwana put the sector in the forefront while the people experience poverty continue to suffer. My colleagues here spoke about how the minister did not mention children in his speech, and I can tell you that the minister in his speech mentioned the private sector 12 times and nothing about the people who live in poverty. So now I would like to move to the concerning patterns that we have noted from National Treasury, honorable members. First of all, we feel that there has been a lot of scapegoating, there has been a lot of playing mind games, and I will tell you what I mean by that. Treasury often says they do not make the decisions, but that cannot be true because they do control the money. When the idea of the basic income grant was first presented to them, the very, very first response we got from National Treasury was, where are we going to get the money? Show us where to get the money, and then we will talk. And then, well, that's what happened. Economists, experts, people who know the numbers and the money did that, and they showed National Treasury where to get the money. But National Treasury still refused to implement the basic income grant. They even said it recently that it's not on the table. The state is not talking about it. National Treasury has also shown a pattern of favoring the rich because they are plainly refusing to increase taxes for the rich. And most of the time when we speak of taxing the rich, a lot of people confuse that with talking about no disrespect about our nurses, our doctors, our police. Those are not the people we are talking about. We are talking about the ultra-rich who can definitely pay more tax and who will not even feel it if they were to pay a little more tax. Another thing we have seen is that National Treasury is against social grants. We have seen many instances where the NT has been against social grants, including the SRD and of course the basic income grant. Previously, Treasury has tried to end the SRD grant and replace it with what we call a family grant, which was very problematic because it would mean a whole lot more people who are currently on the SRD grant would get excluded. So now, in the division of the revenue bill, it has caused a bit of confusion about whether the SRD will be extended like they promised with their provisional budget in the budget speech in 2024 that it will be increased to 2027. But by the look of things, we do not know if the SRD will be extended in March 2025 or if it will be cut in March 2025. And so we asked them to clarify, and National Treasury gave us a very smart answer, and they said, we do not make the decision. They said, the cabinet makes the decision, and what we do is we attach a budget to that decision. If that is the case, then why is National Treasury failing to implement the basic income grant? Because the government has promised it. The MTBPS was a good chance for the minister to lay financial plans for the basic income grant in the next 2 years, because that's what the government said, that in the next 2 years, the BIG will be implemented. But recently, National Treasury says the BIG is not on the table, that the state is not discussing it. Treasury does not bother to engage with the people. And I will also tell you what I mean by that. Unless it is something like this, Treasury doesn't care. I cannot tell you how much we have tried to engage with them through formal communication, through email, through phone calls, through prior applications even, but they never even bother. We have done protests before and we have submitted memorandums to National Treasury and they promise to respond, but they never do. Instead, what you see is that you would have a group of 10 women outside of National Treasury, and you'd have the police hovering around them like they're criminals, and you'd have people in the National Treasury peeking through their windows, looking at them like, what are they doing to them? There's even one person who once said, go to work. Well, I would love to be at work, but I'm here right now because this country has so many issues that we cannot overlook. And the last thing, honorable members, is National Treasury keeps pitting grants against each other. They pit grants and jobs against each other. I want you to understand me. When we speak of grants, it does not mean that we are against jobs. Nobody, and I'm telling you that nobody wants to survive on a social grant for the rest of their lives. But people do not have a choice because there aren't any jobs. We very much favor jobs. But a job is not something that's going to land on my table today. With social grants, people are able to put food on the table, and that's why we mobilize for them so much. So it is wrong for National Treasury to pit the SRD and jobs against each other. During the Finance Committee hearings, when National Treasury was responding, one of the people from National Treasury said that half of the people who are on the SRD grant have qualifications. And so they're looking at ways in which they could use the SRD grant money to create jobs. The jobs thing, they have been talking about it for so long, but the truth is jobs are not going to land on our tables now. And so people need to eat now. So National Treasury needs to stop pitting grants against each other, pitting jobs against grants, and give people what they need so they can survive. And speaking on grants, honorable members, I would like to know, how is it that already the departments in the country are having budget constraints, but you have the Department of Social Development returning money to National Treasury? DSD returned money for social grants in the past year and this year to National Treasury. Already, when we tell them, please increase the grant, they tell us, oh, Treasury does not want to give us the money. But the money they already have, they do not use it. And why is it the National Treasury is not questioning that? What is National Treasury doing about that? Because they gave them the budget, but then they returned the money. When a lot of people who qualify for the SRD grant are actually not getting it. They're getting excluded because of the many, many issues and the regulations that are just making it impossible for them to get it. When the new minister, Tolashe, took over the Department of Social Development, we had hoped that she would share clear plans about what it is that they're going to do to fix the SRD grant, because it has a lot of issues, right? But she didn't do that. Things are not getting better. You know, the new minister did not detail the clear plans. Even after attempts to contact the DSD, they never bothered to respond. They don't respond to the people. Honorable members, it was incredibly disappointing to watch during a meeting with the Portfolio Committee on Social Development and SASSA and DSD, a meeting about the fraud that was uncovered about the SRD grant system. From our understanding, the DSD and SASSA were here in Parliament to respond to that, because these are not new issues. These are the issues that have been happening for years. But SASSA and DSD requested from the chairperson, who even herself was surprised because that was not the plan for the day, they requested that they should not present because they want to go and investigate, and so they requested 30 days to go and investigate whatever issues that were discovered, and then they would come back to the committee. That is not okay, because the DSD already knows about these issues. They had the opportunity to be there and speak up about their plans on how they're planning to counter those issues. But I'm moving on, Honorable Chair, to the demands to this committee, to our demands to this committee. We ask this committee that they put pressure on National Treasury to implement the basic income grant by March 2027, which is the 2-year frame that was promised. We demand that Minister Godongwana treats the basic income grant as an urgent intervention and detail clear plans for its implementation. However, in his implementation, the Minister and National Treasury must not cut budgets for essential services such as social grants, including the SRD. We ask that all grants are increased, especially the child support grant, the disability grant, and the old age grant. Social grants, as you know, are a lifeline for 28 million people in South Africa, and over 10 million people are children. But they have gradually become inadequate to keep up with the cost of living. Food is expensive, not to mention other essential needs and services. The average cost to feed a child in South Africa is now over 900, and the average basket for a household of 4 people costs over 5,000 rand. We ask that National Treasury increases the old age grant, but as well as implements a 13th check for our elderly. We have had Gogos come before this committee before to talk about their hardships, because a lot of our elderlies are taking care of their unimpaired children, and even in some instances their grandchildren. So you'd have a household surviving on the old age grant. And so the Gogos came to this committee to let them know that they need more money, because they simply cannot do. They have medicine that they need to buy, they have medical appointments, they need to buy food and so on, and their grant is just not enough. And of course, we ask that the 370 grant be increased to match the food poverty line as well. Honorable members, for the sake of the health of the country, we ask that the sugary drinks tax be raised to 20%. There's a moratorium that has been put on the sugary drinks tax, and the industry is trying to increase that moratorium. That cannot happen. If Minister Godongwana and the National Treasury allow the sugar industry get their way again, this will not only have dire consequences for people's health, but also show that the National Treasury is easily bullied by the industry. We cannot afford another extension, let alone a 5-year extension. And as I've said, we call on taxes on the rich. South Africa needs a wealth tax. Economists and researchers and experts have shown that with a wealth tax, it could help improve the social protection system in South Africa. So the plea to this committee is that you go and consult with National Treasury, with all their partners that are very concerning to this country, and all these budgets that have been tabled over the years that are not doing anything for our people. And we ask this committee to please tell National Treasury to do better. I'm putting this responsibility on you as the committee to tell them to do better. We cannot continue to be declared the most unequal country in the world. That's not okay. The government of national unity must start unifying the people by ensuring that all who live in this country live in dignity. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. I would like to check with Equal Education. They have already joined on the virtual platform. If they are ready to present, if they are not ready, I can go to the next stakeholder and I'll come back to them. Equal Education. This is a clear indication that they are not yet ready, yet they are on a virtual platform. Let me go straight to section 27 to make a presentation. We'll go back to the virtual platform.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much once again for this opportunity. I will, just in the interest of time, go ahead and start. So I previously mentioned that I am Matsidi Lengwasa, and I'll be doing the presentation for Section 27. Lengwasa, I think someone mentioned that why the C or the G, so it was an error that Home Affairs made when I was a kid, and we've just been rolling with it ever since in my family. So yeah. So Section 27, I think everyone in this room is probably familiar just because we've made presentations on this, is that we are a public interest law center. So we're interested in the constitutional rights to basic education and the constitutional rights to healthcare, right? And as such, our presentation or our analysis of the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill will be around the conditional grants to these areas, as well as the provincial equitable share, because it funds those programs, it funds the core programs of provinces, and also just like climate and gender, because of the implications of education and health in that way. So the context of the submission is that, you know, we've made several submissions, and I think other stakeholders have also done that, and other members of civil society, where we've decried the path of austerity that government has undertaken, and not just as a way to be, to counter the state or anything, but we see ourselves as also participants and see us all as coming together so that we can build a capable state. And we don't think that austerity or these austerity measures will be able to position the state in the best possible way to deliver on its constitutional obligations to deliver quality basic education and healthcare services. So we're concerned that this particular bill, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, did not reverse the budget cuts that were proposed in the main budget, which have threatened the access to education and healthcare. And while austerity affects everyone, we know that it is the most vulnerable communities who are most affected by it, because they can't opt out and outsource their education and health needs to the private sector. They have to rely exclusively on the states for the delivery of education and health services. We are also concerned about gender responsive budgeting, while the department, while National Treasury has made a commitment to implement gender responsive budgeting, they keep postponing it year after year, stating that they have data issues, and we call on Treasury, on Parliament to reject this and ask for more urgency in this, because once upon a time South Africa was actually leading the continent and the world when it came to gender responsive budgeting. But since then we've fallen so behind. Countries like Rwanda, Zimbabwe even have advanced in terms of gender responsive budgeting, and so we think that this is actually quite embarrassing for us, especially when you consider that we're also the most unequal society in the world. This is not the kind of story that we want to be telling to the global stage, especially next year as we prepare, well, actually now, as we prepare to carry the G20 presidency, the historic G20 presidency. So we really can do better, and we hope that this submission will be read in that way, that National Treasury, that Parliament will take on these submissions, understanding and look for solutions in this that could actually position the state and our country to do better for the people of our country. So speaking of gender-responsive budgeting, so gender-responsive budgeting is a critical tool that, despite the name, gender-responsive budgeting, it's actually not a budget for women. It's actually just trying to get interventions to ensure that the budget recognizes, or fiscal policy recognizes, that we all have different lived experiences. You know, how someone who lives in Johannesburg, a young black woman in Johannesburg versus a young black woman in the rural Eastern Cape, for instance, they experience the budget differently and require, you know, the same quality basic education and healthcare services, but the way that they're delivered should be different. And so we're calling on that nuance to be implemented in that, because if we overlook those differences and how we have different, you know, the diversity of our country, we risk actually entrenching the gender inequities of our society that currently plague our society. We're concerned that Treasury has not taken gender-responsive budgeting very seriously. They say they are, and so we're concerned that there's just lip service that's being paid to it, because as you see, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, there is no mention on gender or the implications of the budgets on different identity markers in this country. We also want to emphasize that the austerity path that our fiscal policy is undertaking, while it affects everyone in this country, disproportionately harms sectors where women dominate the workforce, which we are interested in, education and healthcare. It also relies on women's unpaid care work to mask the effects of budget cuts, and it also risks eroding South Africa's leadership in gender-responsive budgeting, which I've already mentioned, and we've already eroded that position since then. So we're really calling on Parliament to hold Treasury accountable for advancing gender-responsive budgeting as a national priority to foster a non-sexist, inclusive society, to really do more than just say that we want to build an inclusive economy. Here's a powerful intervention to do so, and I'm glad that our colleagues from National Treasury are here, and I hope that they can take this seriously, because, you know, there might be differences in our ideology of, like, how do we get to, how do we build a capable state, all of these things. We might have disagreements in how Treasury does it, but gender-responsive budgeting is something that they've committed to, so we don't understand what's the hold-up, what's the problem with it, with doing that. That's something that I think there's consensus between civil society and government, and yet the ball is in Treasury's court. So we're really calling on Parliament to hold Treasury accountable for this. This is just one simple step that could actually make the budget, even in this weak economic climate, actually work for the people in this country. Then we also speak to climate responsive budgeting. So we know that there have been increasing severity of disasters that have destroyed and damaged infrastructure across the country. But if you were to look at the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, you would think that there's only flood damage that happened in the Western Cape. And it's good that there has been allocations towards the damaged schools and clinic facilities in the Western Cape through storm damage, but it is also a reflection of other provinces that are not capable of both spending money and also making a case to Treasury about getting increased allocation to fix those to fix the damaged infrastructure, because they have poor spending performances. And so we really call on, if we are to have a Division of Revenue Amendment Bill that's aligned with the Climate Change Act, that actually allows our state to have this, to respond properly to climate change, it needs to prioritize building the capacity of provinces that are not performing as well, especially in terms of infrastructure, that don't have the capacity, like the Eastern Cape or Mpumalanga, that return underspent funds back to national departments. This is deeply concerning, because just because money is not spent doesn't mean that there isn't a need for it. So then I'll move on to the provincial equitable share. So we are, I mean, this has been covered, I think, in Ilifa Labantwana's presentation about how it hasn't been meeting the budget allocations haven't been meeting inflation, which means that they've been eroded by the cost of living, as well as the rising dependency on public services. This has really dire implications. We see it now with Gauteng's funding cuts to scholar transport. Again, just because the budget is cut doesn't mean that learners don't have a need for quality scholar transport. They need those that transport in order to fulfill their quality, to receive quality basic education. So we really recommend just reversing the trend of disinvesting in the provincial equitable share, and call for it to actually keep up with inflation, population growth, and service demands. So next is, we'll talk about the personal funding, which is the proposed 11 billion rand early retirement plan. So the aim of this is to create opportunities for young professionals. And while we agree with this, because there is so much unemployment, especially youth unemployment in this country, we're concerned that this is an attempt by the National Treasury to reduce the public sector wage bill. Even though Treasury says that is not true, this also contradicts what they have said, that they are committed to reducing the public sector wage bill. So there is no clarity in that. And our position is that this is going to exacerbate understaffing in education and healthcare. So in the healthcare sector specifically, while it's great that there are junior staff, and we should have more junior nurses so we can create opportunities for young people to join the public sector, the public health sector, we're worried that there isn't going to be, or they haven't considered how to transfer experience, you know, like the skill and decades of experience that you get from being in the public health sector for a really long time. And we're also concerned that this might also exacerbate the severe staff shortages that are faced in the public health sector, and just really will juniorize healthcare. And we know that healthcare is life or death in many cases, and we can't take risks with that. You know, we need a combination of both experience and also early and creating new opportunities for people. So it shouldn't be one or the other, but it actually should be both. For the education sector, also, we can't just look at that intervention on its own. We should also consider that we're at the lowest teacher replacement rates in the country right now. Already, provinces are freezing teaching posts for 2025, which are likely to exacerbate overcrowded classrooms. And the budget to train new teachers through the Funza Lushaka bursary has been cut this year. So all of this together, it's just likely that it's going to exacerbate the understaffing in the public sector. So we overall just call on Parliament to hold Treasury to account regarding the personnel public sector wage bill, but to look at it not just as a bill or wage spending, but to see it as an investment in the people of our country. And we need to really address understaffing to ensure quality healthcare services. I said this in a previous presentation, is that our fiscal policy needs to reflect the lived experiences and what people need in this country. And nobody is going into a public clinic, a public hospital, and saying, we have too many nurses, we have too many doctors. Nobody's saying in a public school that we have too many teachers. And yet our public sector, our fiscal policy and our budgets are saying the opposite thing, and saying that we need to arrest our spending on these sectors. So this is really concerning for us, and we really think that we need to do better as a country when it comes to how we tackle or how we consider and conceptualize personnel funding in this country. Then I'll talk about the healthcare conditional grants. So overall, they received a 0.8%, or healthcare received a 0.8% allocation, which of course is insufficient to meet the rising costs and demand. We know that South Africa's public healthcare sector is deeply underfunded, and we also have seen that this bill continues some of, or it entrenches some of the cuts that were proposed in the main budget, like the cuts to healthcare infrastructure, as well as to the HIV grant, but also that it proposes budget cuts to areas like women and children's health, which threatens our SDGs and women's healthcare access. We're concerned about this, and we also call for Parliament to ensure fiscal policy supports universal healthcare and addresses the disparities for a healthier and more equitable future for people in this country. So I did mention that the healthcare infrastructure grant received a budget cut of 1.2 billion at the beginning of the year, which is disappointing because, yes, this budget is plagued by underspending, which is something that we've decried as a sector, especially as civil society. But the budget cuts plus the underspending together are just a recipe for disaster when it comes to our healthcare infrastructure in this country. We see it because currently many healthcare facilities are overcrowded, have deteriorating facilities, and they have inadequate repair funding. So they cite historical underspending, National Treasury does, but it fails to address the systemic issues that cause this underspending. And this really threatens the interventions or the idea of building a capable state. And so we really call on a better way or different way of looking at healthcare investments, and we might have to build capacity of the provinces, but also of municipalities to be able to deliver quality health infrastructure over the long term. I already spoke about the severe storm damage that impacted many provinces this year, but it was the Western Cape that was able to secure funding to replace that. And we really need that. That should be the gold standard for all the provinces, because while, yes, it's true, the Western Cape did need funding for this, we've seen in previous years where KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape had infrastructure, clinics and hospitals that were destroyed by the fatal floods of 2022, I believe, and they didn't receive allocations for that. They didn't meet or they didn't apply for it. And so it meant that they had to redirect funding, already constrained funding from one place to another. It shouldn't be like that. It should be the way that the intervention that happened for the Western Cape should be the standard for every province in the country. But we know that there's underspending that plagues those provinces. And it's the provinces that actually have the greatest need for infrastructure that have the greatest spending issues, which is something that we think that Treasury needs to look into and strengthen oversight to ensure transparency and accountable public procurements. The HIV and AIDS funding, so the main budget had proposed a 1.3 billion rand cut to this, or the main division of revenue bill, and that hasn't been reversed, which is quite sad for us, because on the one hand, yes, it is true that South Africa can procure antiretroviral treatments at a lower cost than before. We think that this funding should actually be redirected to improving our antiretroviral uptake and retention in this country, because again, you have Botswana, Rwanda, and other African counterparts who have met the 95 targets, and yet South Africa is still lagging behind. And yes, we have made great strides when it comes to our HIV/AIDS response in the country. We've come a long way. We're concerned that this sort of intervention might regress us to go, and we don't want to go back to a previous time. It's a very dark time in our history. I'll just move on to the next grants, which is the communicable and non-communicable disease program. We're concerned that there have been budget cuts to different grants areas in this program, so women and health, maternal health, communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, and child, youth, and school health. And there is no justification for these cuts or these shifts, and so we're calling on Parliament to scrutinize this and ask Treasury, what is the decision that was taken, like what justifies that, because it's definitely not because there's a reduced necessity for these programs. This is particularly concerning for us from a gender perspective, because many of the stockouts in this country, medical stockouts, have to are usually contraceptives, and it's usually due to budgetary constraints. So any further budget cuts to this may also reduce the capacity in the country to address teenage pregnancy, which is on the rise, and also to create a gender equitable healthcare system. We're also concerned that this might, I think what the committee on maternal mortality did raise that budget cuts could threaten the progress that South Africa has made towards reducing the maternal mortality rate. And we call on Parliament to also take this seriously, this committee to take this, take heed of this warning, because this is something that we don't want to bring back in this country, because we've made such great progress since '94 in order to reduce this maternal mortality rate. On a positive note, something that we really do welcome is the recovery of the 3 billion rand by this SIU on, and government at large. Department of Health, Treasury was involved, I believe, on fraudulent claims. This is good because this 3 billion rand should be going towards quality healthcare services and had been going in the pockets of unscrupulous lawyers. And so it's good that there has been efforts to strengthened efforts to combat fraud and corruption. And we just recommend that this funding that has been, to keep going at this, because medical legal claims were once considered a sub-national risk by National Treasury. So it's good to see that there's progress in overcoming this. And we're really calling for these funds to be invested in quality healthcare for those who need it most. Then I'll move on to basic education. I'm nearly done. So overall, basic education has received a slight budget cut of 1.2 billion, which is not great in this context, because there are already issues when it comes to provincial resources for scholar transport, stationery, learner materials, among others. But what's really concerning to us about basic education in expenditure is that infrastructure is a real problem. The CD project, like of the targeted 30 schools, only one new school was built this year, and none of the schools none of the targeted schools received water facilities. We'll talk a little bit more about the SIBG, but this is something that, the inefficiencies in infrastructure funding and underspending are stuff that are really concerning to Section 27 and to our sector at large. So the education infrastructure grant, I'll actually just move past this just to say that it also received, the only difference that it was to repair Western Cape schools that are damaged by floods. This should be towards, this should actually be towards across the country, because schools across the country unfortunately were affected by flood damage, including in the Free State and in Gauteng. Okay, there's just some recommendations, but I'm more interested in talking about the school infrastructure backlog grants, because that's something that's quite topical right now. We have been concerned about it because there have been low spending rates, which have hindered learners' rights and infrastructure improvements. And the FFC had actually made recommendations that the state should not rely on indirect grants like the SIBG. And it's unsurprising because the 35 million rand increase that they received in the MTBPS and in the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill was actually because they didn't spend the funds last year. And when you think about what happened last year, is that there were already budget cuts to the SIBG, and they still couldn't spend the little money that they had. This was very concerning to us. And so in a way, we welcome the proposed merger of the SIBG into the EIG, so from a indirect grant to the direct grant, which performs better. But we caution that there needs to be more scrutiny around this to ensure that provinces are equipped to address infrastructure backlogs. Because what we have seen is that, yes, the EIG performs better than the SIBG, but it's only, say, the Western Cape and Gauteng who have really great spending performance regarding the EIG, whereas provinces like Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape have returned funds historically back to national, which were then redirected to Gauteng and the Western Cape, and that it made the EIG look like it performs even better. So there's an inequality there, and also the original purpose of the SIBG still remains unresolved. So we're really calling on this committee to demand evidence of readiness from all the provinces and their provincial capacity, and to support capacity building initiatives in the provinces so that the EIG doesn't end up becoming like the SIBG. I feel like I'm running out of time, so I'll just rush and say that the NSNP also has challenges, even though it is well-funded, and there are disruptions to it, and just calling for innovative solutions towards the NSNP so that we can scale it, so that there can be economies of scale, and to reduce the inefficiency so that we can expand it to compulsory grade R now as per the Bella Act, as well as ECD learners and meals on weekends, and also because there was an intervention that the DBE had proposed, but it was also marred in allegations of corruption, which is a concern. And so we're really calling on rights-based procurement reform, especially for the school nutrition program. So in conclusion, this is really bleak moment, but I think that there is an opportunity, as an optimist, that there's an opportunity to turn things around and really build the South Africa that people in this country really deserve and the future of our country can be proud of. And we think that the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill is not, it's not a small thing. It's a really powerful tool in doing that, so that Parliament can actually, it offers Parliament an opportunity to adopt a transformative rights-based approach to fiscal policy. There's some recommendations that we made, and really just call the committee to take on this opportunity to lead South Africa towards a just and sustainable future, to reaffirm our constitutional values, and to lay the foundation for economic justice and equality in our country. So yeah, I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and the presentation is welcomed. Estelle, is equal education ready? Equal education, you may come in and present. Like those that are in the house, you'll have no more than 25 minutes to make a presentation before the committee. Daniel, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Now you are audible.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm very sorry about the sound issue.
Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to present to this select committee. We were very grateful to be able to present similar information to the standing committee last week, and we're very grateful for the opportunity, particularly to do so online. I'm here on behalf of both Equal Education Law Centre, where I work, and our movement partner, Equal Education. And we're actually based, for those who might not know, in Khayelitsha, but because I'm currently away for urgent work, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to present via the Teams link. Oh, sorry, the Zoom link. So essentially, we are deeply concerned, as many of our colleagues are, including our colleagues from Ilifa Labantwana, Section 27, Amandla, many others in the sector. And it's not my intention, Chair, to rehash many of the concerns that I think have been very well raised by my colleagues. So I will, although those are contained in our presentation, which will of course be made available, and I hope was made available to the members, I'm going to try refine the focus of my presentation to if possible, focus on recommendations and solutions. But of course, it will require just a little bit of background on what we perceive to be the problem. That's just in the interest of not wasting the time of the members today. So when we speak to the mandate from which both Equal Education and Equal Education Law Centre come, and we've been very privileged to have been able to present previously to the NCOP and to Parliament, and to the National Assembly. Fundamentally, both Equal Education and the Equal Education Law Centre are movement partners that are committed to not only equal but equitable and quality access and enjoyment of the right to basic education and early childhood development. So Equal Education is youth-led, and it's a mass democratic movement with thousands of learners across the country known as equalizers. And we at the Equal Education Law Centre are a public interest law centre specifically focused on education law. And we do so through community lawyering, movement lawyering, and legal research and advocacy. And it's from this basis that we have engaged very keenly with the budget process for a number of years. and were involved in the MTBPS lockup when the MTBPS was announced. It's in that light, and I'll skip past these slides because they'll be made available to the members. It's a very important letter, but I think it would be too long for the time allocation. What I would particularly like to focus on at this juncture, Chair, is Parliament's duty to amend or revise the budget. And again, it's not my intention to teach anything to the members of this select committee, which they'll surely know better than I do. What it is my intention to do, however, is to underscore the importance of the exercise of this duty, particularly at this juncture of following the MTBPS and the Division of Revenue Bill. What we know, and what of course the members will know, Chair, is that the power to determine public spending is fundamentally one which rests with, and ultimately one which rests with Parliament and not Treasury. We know that Parliament has long taken this duty seriously, but we would submit, Chair, that this duty is perhaps no more important than now, not only where we know that for the first time since '94, no party commands a simple majority, and so we have a strong public demand for enhanced and collaborative and cooperative oversight, but also because at this juncture we're facing a massive risk to the protection of socioeconomic rights in South Africa, which are not only a constitutional imperative, as of course the members of this committee will be aware, but are, as my colleague from Section 27 mentioned, a very important investment in our country, and one that then can and has been costed. So we know that one of the most important roles that Parliament often plays in the budget process is scrutiny over expenditure. And very often that's understood to be scrutiny over the way in which allocated funds are spent. And it's very important, and I will touch on that in my presentation. But fundamentally, Chair, and specifically with regards to the right to basic education and to early childhood development, we think that the most important role that Parliament should and must play at this juncture is to exercise oversight over the duty to spend. We submit, Chair, as many colleagues have, that Treasury is currently failing in its duty to sufficiently spend to ensure that acts that have been passed by this Parliament are able to be implemented and are meaningful for the people that they affect. So when we speak about early learning, essentially what we're facing here, Chair, is an unfunded mandate. The first unfunded mandate that we have, and that some of our colleagues have touched on, is the mandate created by the Bella Act, which is now in law, save for two suspended clauses. But of course, those aren't the ones that are, determinative of funding. In particular, the creation of a new category of mandatory education, in other words, the inclusion of grade R as being part of mandatory basic education, requires significant expenditure. And it's not my intention here, Chair, to discuss the merits or controversy or anything like that about Bella. It is now established law. My intention here, Chair, and my deep concern is to point out that although Parliament has passed this law legitimately after extensive public consultation, and the President has enacted it, and both the executive and the legislature have therefore exercised their oversight and their discretionary roles, Treasury, through its fiscal policy, is currently, and through the DORA at this point in time, is making it impossible for this act to be implemented effectively. So when we speak about grade R in particular, we're speaking about approximately 17.26 billion rand that is required. And for the members who might be interested in exploring these figures some more, of course, I'll be available for questions. But these figures are not sourced from us or from civil society. They're sourced from the memorandum of the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill as it was at the time. It can be found in paragraph 4 of the explanatory memorandum. And that was information which was duly noted and recorded, and I think very well appreciated by Parliament at the time, and has also been further confirmed in the Department of Basic Education's briefings to the Portfolio Committee on Education, that there is a significant capital outlay required. That would require 5.26 billion rand in expenditure for infrastructure in order to allow grade R to be a reality as a mandatory part of basic education. And secondly, it would require about 12 billion rand. And that's both for the hiring and paying of sufficient educators, and secondly, for the equalization of services across the country. None of this funding, Chair, is present at all in the MTBPS or DORA. In fact, it's not even mentioned. And I really must stress, Chair, that when we were present at the MTBPS lockup, as many of our colleagues were, we and a number of other colleagues made several attempts to query this with the colleagues from Treasury during the discussion with economists and analysts, and our questions were unanswered. And I don't know what the reason for that is, but it's very clear that at this stage there is no answer being given to the public as to why an act of great significance and great public interest, which is duly passed, has absolutely not been funded by Treasury, despite the fact that it will have massive consequences next year. Those consequences are firstly that it will force children out of functioning community-based grade R programs, which will no longer be able to exist unless they re-register as independent institutions. And it will force them into an already overburdened public school system because there'll be insufficient funding. But the second consequence, as I'm sure members of this House are aware, is that Bella has criminal penalties for parents who fail to comply with the duty to have their children in school when they're a part of the mandatory, when they are a part of compulsory school-going age. If children are not able to attend a grade R program, not because their parents don't want them to, but because there's either insufficient funding for a program near them, or because the schools are so overcrowded that it would be unsafe or unwise to have a child enrolled, we would be passing on this criminal liability to parents despite their desire to act in the best interest of their children. And one very important question that a member asked in the standing committee when we presented this information was, where we would be able to recommend to the committee specific figures on that must be revised in the budget. And the benefit specifically with this underfunding, I suppose you might call it a benefit, is that we know the figures because they've been cited themselves by the Department of Basic Education, because Parliament has correctly identified these as being the figures that are necessary. And to speak briefly, and I'm sure we'll be able to discuss it further in question times if members would like to, when it comes to where this money will come from, we must stress again, Chair, that this is not a matter of having to swap line items for other line items in the budget. This is a matter of an immediately realizable right, which is not only immediately realizable, but is mandated by legislation by Parliament, and increased funding must be made available by Treasury. We're not advocating, Chair, for throwing any other socioeconomic right under the bus, and we must be very clear on that. What we're submitting, Chair, is that there exists a legal duty on the part of Treasury to act not only in accordance with its own internal policies and protocols, but with its constitutional imperatives and the legislative imperatives created when the House passes legislation. We have a very similar underfunded mandate or unfunded mandate when it comes to early childhood development. We know that quality early learning yields massive returns on investment. The one here speaks only when it comes to learning as a 13% return on investment. And we also know that it's crucial for reducing inequality, not only economically, but also socially. We also know, however, Chair, that current ECD funding is only 0.2% of government spending. That has not changed in the MTBPS or in the DORA. And there's often a debate, Chair, about whether the government or the private sector should be carrying more of a burden on ECD. The reality, Chair, is that neither the private sector nor the state are currently carrying the major burden for the cost of ECD programs. Parents and caregivers in poor, predominantly Black communities are. And parents and caregivers around the country are currently shouldering a burden of about 14 billion rand in fees for their children to attend ECD centers. And there is sometimes a perception that many ECD centers are, no fee centers or are free ECD centers. This is not the reality, Chair. The reality is that the overwhelming majority, even in very low income communities, are required to charge fees because they don't get sufficient support from the frozen 17 Rand subsidy per child for the ECD subsidy. And as a result, many parents across the country are spending up to and sometimes even more than half of their monthly child support grant on fees for their children at early childhood development centers. So I mention this to put this into context that this is This is not something which we can be seeking, just short fixes for or short-term collaboration for. It is a massive, massive shortfall. And across the ECD sector and the basic education sector, we were all unsure as to the extent to which the MTBPS or the DORB would make provision for this massive shortfall, which government has repeatedly recognized, which the executive has repeatedly called for attention towards. None of us expected, Chair, for there to be absolutely no clarity provided in the DORB, for there to be absolutely no changes made in the DORB or in the MTBPS for such a crucial right, which is arguably uncontroversial in its importance, considering the attention and the urgency with which it is referred to by the executive. My colleague from Section 27 has already very well presented on the lack of gender-responsive budgeting, but I will just point out, of course, that gender-responsive budgeting has a particularly disproportionate effect, or the lack thereof has a particularly disproportionate effect on ECD, in which the sector employs about 250,000 women, 90% of whom earn below minimum wage. And so when we're looking at the importance of ECD, we're speaking about it not only of the crucial importance for young children, and not only of the crucial importance for the employment of women in the sector, but of course, as a mechanism of ensuring that women are able to participate in the economy, parents are able to participate in the economy. All of this is jeopardized by the fact that despite our existing commitments from the executive through the National Integrated ECD policy, this is not being funded. We, of course, know that there are systemic inequities in education funding. And again, Chair, my colleague has pointed very well to, colleagues have pointed very well to the current issues with the provincial equitable share formula. We would just stress, to be brief, that it is, in our view, entirely unacceptable that information from the 2010-2011 income and expenditure data is still being relied upon for a provincial equitable share formula that should have been amended to be in line with current figures, which should be available from the 2022 census. In fact, the MTBPS statement recognizes this and explicitly states that it is nevertheless still relying on data from more than a decade ago, in which massive demographic shifts have occurred in the country that are not accounted for in the provincial equitable share formula, and that results in massive inequality between provinces. Then, Chair, we would also say that to draw specific attention to one of the consequences of this is that what some members perhaps might not yet be aware of is that when it comes to the salaries that are paid, the amount of money that's spent by each province for teachers across schools, across different quintiles, there's often an understanding, which is correct, that higher fee-paying schools and quintile 1 to 3 schools, quintile 4 to 5 and fee-paying schools are often better resourced, whether through the parent body or SGBs. What is perhaps not as well known is that even when it comes to the allocation of government funding, at least in a province such as the Western Cape, the government currently allocates more money per teacher, in other words, pays a greater amount in wages in fee-paying schools than it does towards non-fee-paying schools. And we really must stress that in non-fee-paying schools, which already rely entirely on state support, they are currently receiving less funding, at least in the Western Cape, when it comes to the ability to pay wages for teachers. And so when we speak, and when our colleagues have spoken about post-provisioning cuts, we're speaking about a system in which we are already seeing massive inequalities between fee-paying and non-fee-paying schools, and which we are already seeing a massive difference in the ability for SGBs in wealthier schools to shoulder that burden by being able to privately contract with teachers. And this is over and above the fact that that non-fee-paying schools, by and large, are often receiving less funding from the state than fee-paying schools are. Water and sanitation, again, Chair, as many of our colleagues have mentioned, is crucial, and not to sort of harp on the problems here because they've been very well identified by many of our comrades and colleagues, but it's fundamental to stress that water and sanitation is absolutely crucial to the right to basic education, particularly as it pertains to girls whose period poverty, for lack of a better term, and whose the violation of their menstrual rights through a limited access to sanitation, through limited access to menstrual health products, and through a limited access to education, when they're often missing school for these reasons, has a direct consequence not only for their dignity, but specifically in the context of basic education, for their equitable access to education. We note, Chair, that the original targets were revised downwards in the MTBPS for the provision of water and sanitation facilities, massively revised downwards. Whereas there were supposed to be 100 facilities provided, the figure has now been reduced, as far as I'm aware, to 7. We're talking not only, Chair, about a reduction in funding in real terms, because of course, as our colleagues have mentioned, it doesn't keep up with inflation, but a reduction within the MTBPS about the aspirations which the Treasury sees the state being capable of achieving when it comes to securing these important socioeconomic rights for children in particular and for girls. This is very similar with the trend for school infrastructure and overcrowding. Our colleagues again have pointed very well to the Funza Lushaka schemes. And in addition, we would point out that the only funding that is still made available fairly clearly in the MTBPS is for the provisioning of scholarships or bursaries for PGCE qualifications. The issue, of course, being, Chair, that if the intention is to encourage more involvement from across society, but particularly from young Black educators and young Black female educators, it's deeply exclusionary to rely on a PGCE bursary, which requires, of course, given that it's a PGCE, for someone to have an undergraduate degree in order to complete the PGCE. The scrapping of funding for undergraduate education programs cannot be remedied by a program that requires people already to have participated in the formal education sector, in the tertiary education sector, and received a degree. And so we would say that in addition to the problems that have been identified, it's also just not a fix to reallocate that funding to an exclusionary system. We see very similar issues with learner-teacher support material, the National School Nutrition Program, scholar transport, and the National Norms and Standards for School funding. Again, Chair, as I mentioned, I wanted to focus in particular on our recommendations, and I've made a couple of them, which is that the committee should, and we argue must, exercise its oversight role by demanding, firstly, clarity from Treasury as to why these existing legal mandates have not been funded. Secondly, we think that one of the consequences of this is when it comes to the votes on the DORB, that there must be full funding for grade R to build state capacity to ensure universal attendance. There must be an increase in the equitable share allocations to appropriately invest in ECD. We must ensure that all of the components of expenditure are not applied blanket across the country, but have a rurality component that adjusts the education component to the provincial equitable share formula to reflect the very obvious reality, Chair, that the lived experiences of people across the country are deeply impacted, not only by race and class, but very often by geographical or spatial positions. We would recommend that revisions to the DBE post-provisioning policies should promote progressive spending. In other words, spending that certainly at least halts the trend of spending more money on fee-paying schools than on non-fee-paying schools, but arguably should be spending the inverse. And then, of course, Chair, we think that one of the most important duties that this committee already exercises, which is the demanding of further clarity and transparency, must be exercised. This includes, as our colleague mentioned, transparency around the merger of the EIG and the SIBG. This includes transparency over the failure of the Treasury to fund and to maintain at least the existing targets for sanitation and for school infrastructure. And it, of course, includes, as many of us have mentioned, oversight over the reallocation or the diversion of funds, whether it comes to things like Funza Lushaka, to textbook schemes, or to other issues like national norms and standards for school funding. Chair, ultimately, while we are very happy to answer further questions and very much will do so, we believe that it is very clear from both this committee and from the standing committee that we presented to previously that there is significant support for the rights of children to basic education and to early childhood development in these committees. We understand that we would be preaching to the choir in trying to convince members of this council of the importance of children's basic rights. And so we don't intend to do that. What we intend to do, and what we hope we have done throughout this presentation, is to seek the active efforts of this council and, of course, of the standing committee. Sorry, this committee and the standing committee as well, in meaningfully effecting that collective understanding of the importance of children's rights by demanding clarity from Treasury, by recognizing the Treasury's current fiscal policy as expressed through the DORB is directly undermining this Council and this National Assembly's prerogatives and powers when it comes to funding and when it comes to passing legislation. And by insisting that any DORB that is passed is not only one which recognizes in name the importance of socioeconomic rights, but recognizes these rights as a crucial investment in the future of our country. Thank you very much, Chair, for the time you've made available, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Peter will now hand over to Comrade Parks to make a presentation on behalf of Cosatu.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to honourable members. Apologies for my voice. I think Honourable Ryder made it exhausted over the past week, so I think karma's coming back to get me. But Chair, I think just to say thanks for giving space to Cosatu, just to share our views on the DORA and the medium-term budget statement. I think, Chair, just to start with a bit of context, we really hope to see a much more bold and decisive MTBS and DORA bill. We really hope to see government take a much more aggressive approach to stimulating growth, rebuilding the state, slashing unemployment, tackling crime and corruption. And I think we really felt, Chair, this is a MTBS, a DORA bill, which is a business as usual approach. We didn't really see many new measures to introduced, and yet we have a really struggling economy. We see many parts of the state, municipalities hanging on for dear life. And I think, Chair, you know, as members of Parliament, I think you will know that the patience of society is not limitless. It's critical to give hope to society. And I think you can see in the May 29th elections that society is really despondent without being alarmist. And so we really do think there's a need for government to be seen to be driving the economy, to be delivering a better life. So as Labour, as Cosatu, we've been quite underwhelmed by the bill, by the budget statement. And I think, Chair, we feel that government at times, especially Treasury, is really fixated on slashing the wage bill. And that's going to, we workers feel, is going to leave them deeper in debt and having to also cover numerous vacancies across the state. Chair, look, as Cosatu, we do think it's critical that when you have the budget statements, the bills, that we just anchor it in the socio-economic crisis we face. We have a 41% unemployment rate. There was good news last week about the unemployment falling slightly, which is welcome. But before that, we had 3/4 of unemployment increasing. If you take youth unemployment, Chair, it's 70%, and that's a ticking time bomb for us as a country. If you look at the medium-term expenditure framework projections for economic growth, is about 1.7%. So that's barely going to keep pace with the youth entering the economy every year, let alone beginning to decrease unemployment. And of course, poverty, inequality, crime and corruption remain endemic. We're really seeing numbers of municipalities who are dysfunctional, who are struggling to provide basic services across the board, across provinces rising. We're seeing many public services overwhelmed by vacancies. SOEs too are in serious trouble. And of course, I think we've seen at a municipal level, especially the infrastructure is really, really aging. Chair, look, we do appreciate Treasury wants to manage the deficits, the debt crisis, and we agree you must manage it. But our approach, Chair, is to stimulate the economy, to enable businesses to take off, to create jobs, to rebuild the capacity of the state, to deliver the public service the economy requires to thrive. So I think for us, Chair, we feel Treasury wants to put the cart in front of the horse. We'd rather see the horse in front of the cart, and we'd rather see us feeding the horse to enable it to move forward. So a 1.7% GDP growth rate, Chair, is going to see us accepting a 40% unemployment rate for the time coming. We think, Chair, that government has been cutting expenditure for quite some time and has not achieved anything. It's not achieved better results. If you look internationally, whether you look at the US, you look at China, etc., other major industrial economies, the approach has been the opposite, to stimulate the economy, to invest in the quality of infrastructure, to kickstart the economy. So I think that's the approach we would advocate, Chair, as Cosatu. If you really want to enable the tax revenue you require to fund the state and to pay down the debt, that's the approach I think we feel is fundamental. Chair, I know members, especially Honourable Ryder and many other members, would always ask about the wage bill. We understand that logic. It's always going to be the major component of any state budget, of any workplace's budget. But I think for us, Chair, if we go back to the basics, in '94, we had 34 million citizens, about 1.1 million public servants. Today, the population is essentially doubled to 64 million, yet the public service headcount has barely grown to about 1.2 million. And you have about an average about 70,000 unfilled funded vacancies at any time. We've seen high number of vacancy rates in critical frontline services, teachers, the police, health, home affairs, etc. So some might say, well, look, the wage bill's out of control. But if you take the budget statements themselves, so not Cosatu stats, the Treasury stats, the wage bill was stable at 35% of the budget from 2008 for 15 years, is now decreased to about 31% of the budget. So it's been decreasing over the past 2 years. So if anything, the wage bill is in crisis because it's been cut too much. So the other consequence which we are seeing in different frontline services, that is you continue to squeeze the public service wage bill, squeeze public servants, we're fueling a brain drain. So we're finding doctors, literally the day they finish the community health service, they're on the next flight to London. We'll find teachers being poached to go to work in New Zealand or private schools. We're finding doctors moving to the US, to Dubai, Qatar, etc. And all of these public service positions, Chair, the state invests heavily in the education of these public servants. These are skilled professionals. They're highly sought after, and we're losing them. We now see, Chair, Australia recruiting our police officers. And it's fine to say that, well, the public servants get paid better than the private sector. Sure, if you take a apples for oranges approach, the public sector doesn't employ farm workers, doesn't employ 900,000 domestic workers, it doesn't employ mine workers, etc., or bus drivers. So you should compare what a doctor earns in the private sector to what they earn in the public sector, and you'll find then the public sector is shortchanged. If you compare what a teacher earns in the public sector versus the private sector, again, you'll see the discrepancy is against the public sector. Chair, we really hoped in the Dora bill to see some sort of resolution to the Western Cape teachers crisis, where about 2,407 contract teachers' jobs are at risk. And again, that's likely to escalate to other provinces in the medium-term expenditure framework. So it's not just a Western Cape phenomena, but we didn't really find solutions in that regard, Chair. So proposals basically, one is that government should table its proposal on early retirement packages to the PSCBC for engagement. We hope it won't see a further brain drain from the state. Government has done this before. In the Madiba administration, teachers offered voluntary severance packages. Government regretted it later. You have seen the late Minister Pravin Gordhan try to assist Eskom and Transnet to bring back, and Janelle as well, to bring back skilled professionals who were lost to the SOEs. And in fact, Chair, about 3 weeks ago, the police service actually put out an advert requesting former police officers to come back to the police service. So we're wary of government looking for shortcut solutions, and yet a year down the road, we will regret it. But we had hoped, Chair, to see some sort of roadmap to rebuild, to modernize the public services, frontline services. And if I can be cheeky, Chair, if there's a need to reduce headcount, we would hope to see the executive leading from the front. We don't think we need to have 43 deputy ministers, for example, or to see in every local election the number of councillors being increased left and right. Chair, I think in this committee and in the previous parliaments, I think we've all said that the state of local government is deeply concerning. A decade ago, Chair, we had about 10% of municipalities in financial distress. Today, it averages about 2/3. Previous years, we had seen the number of municipalities struggling to pay staff increase to about 3 dozen. I think, Honourable Chair, Honourable Ryder, that's pleasantly decreased to about 13 municipalities. So that at least is some welcome news on that front. But again, if we look at municipalities struggling to spend the infrastructure grants, we see it rising in many instances, and we've seen companies closing, especially many rural towns in the Free State and Northwest, and then again, retrenching workers, putting those workers into deeper poverty. But Chair, we do hope that the municipal systems, the infrastructure grant interventions in about 140 municipalities will make an impact. We're hopeful in that regard. And Chair, government's put a very positive infrastructure program of 943 billion rand, of which about almost just over a quarter is allocated to municipalities. So it is critical this intervention does work. But you'll find at the same time that COGTA has been found wanting with regards to its infrastructure targets. That is quite worrying. Chair, we must really welcome the progress being made, or the efforts rather being made by Treasury to assist municipalities with regards to the electricity debt intervention program. There has been some indication that some of those municipalities are already falling back. So we need to see how can we support Treasury in that intervention. But it can't be sustainable that we bail out ESCOM on one hand, ESCOM then has to subsidize municipalities. And I think the debt of municipalities to ESCOM right now is about 90 billion rand, and that's rising by an average of about 10 billion rand a year. So that's extremely concerning. But I think, and honestly, Chair, all of these just point to a discussion that is needed about a sustainable municipal funding model, because the status quo, whatever matrix you take, it's deeply concerning, it's not working. But I think, Chair, we must welcome the disaster relief interventions for municipalities of about 700 million rand, and allocation to support municipal systems as well. We hope it will make an impact. Chair, we're not saying that you must keep money to a municipality who can't spend it, but we had hoped for some sort of explanation around the cuts to Nelson Mandela Bay, Joburg for transport of about 300 million rand, and the bulk infrastructure cuts for Drakenstein of about 225 million rand. There could be logical explanations, they could have spent the money, but we'd hope it wasn't just a capacity issue. Chair, we've been raising the number of municipalities with this committee about who are in arrears to the workers in terms of salaries, and at least without jinxing ourselves, we've seen positive progress. In the Eastern Cape, it used to be about 8 municipalities, there's now about 2. Of course, these are 2 of the most dysfunctional municipalities. In Limpopo is Tabazimbi, I think since June or July. In Mpumalanga and Nkomazi, Northwest, it's also progress. You normally have about 8 municipalities in Northwest who are the delinquents. It's 2 right now, but that 2 did support Mamusa amongst the most dysfunctional municipalities. You would see them in the headlines continuously, all sorts of shenanigans. The Northern Cape, Chair, is quite alarming because you've seen no progress there. It's about 7 municipalities, and they tend to be in serious trouble. I think the worst offender, Chair, tends to be Thembelihle municipality, which is your Hopetown, Stellenbosch areas. At one stage, that municipality, Chair, was owing workers about 12 months' worth of salaries. So it does speak to a real crisis here, Chair. Chair, we've attached in our submission a list of about a list of municipalities across 8 provinces, which are in arrears to about 160 municipal pension funds. Some are for councillors, some are for workers. So this is from the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. Some are in arrears about 213 months. We're not sure how could that possibly be humanly possible to be in arrears for so long. Some are in arrears for 6 months. Whatever the status is, even if it's only half of that, it's still a crisis. We should get the latest FFCA report for 2024 shortly, and we will share with the committee as well. But we have received reports constantly of workers who go to claim medical aid benefits and are told the funds are depleted. So, Chair, it is a ticking time bomb. Again, we need a discussion about a sustainable municipal model. And I think also we'd hope, Chair, in this 7th Parliament to see the NCOP being much more aggressive around these delinquent municipalities. Chair, in terms of departments, I think we're seeing many frontline public service departments really struggling to cope, whether it's education, it's health, whether it's home affairs, etc., with the significant budget cuts. But I think there are some welcome additional allocations for water and sanitation, for local government, for human settlements, the disaster relief as well. But again, Chair, I think Treasury does make the correct point that you allocate money to departments and they don't meet their targets. And if we looked at, we're 3/4 of the way through the year, and you see Department of Health, COGTA, water, sanitation, basic infrastructure, agriculture, really being quite far behind the significant targets. That's quite worrying because you're heading towards the Christmas period. Not much will be done. But I think, Chair, we have seen at least some progress on underspending rollovers, and I think there may be testimony to Treasury's interventions in that regard. I think, Chair, to make the point that we're not defending departments to say they must get money for the sake of it, but because society, working class communities, businesses, the economy, they depend upon well-functioning public services. And we have not really seen detailed plans from government about how we're going to rebuild frontline services. But many of them are really showing the strains of budget cuts. But there is some positive welcome allocations, Chair, to local government, to housing, to health, to transport, basic education, around the disaster relief, especially for the Western Cape. There's been some useful allocation to water, sanitation, and human settlements as well. Chair, I think we must appreciate the allocation for school infrastructure as well, for Gauteng, Western Cape and Eastern Cape. And hopefully we'll see some progress next year in terms of the infrastructure backlogs. And there was a welcome allocation, Chair, to formalize the taxi industry. Chair, taxi industry is the backbone of our public transport system, but there should be not a blank check for the taxi industry. We see this industry time and again, it violates tax laws, labor laws, roads, traffic laws, and when you raise it with them, they're less than impressed with you, Chairperson. So there should be a quid pro quo. So again, Chair, I think the plea is to Parliament to hold these departments much more accountable for the targets, for the spending, but also around the modernization of the public frontline services. So Chair, in conclusion, I think for us basically to make the point, we don't have endless time to turn things around. Working class communities are really struggling, workers are struggling. And I think our fear or our difference with Treasury is that a business as usual approach is not really going to yield different results. And the economy does need a well-functioning state, well-functioning public services. So we hope that in February in the budget speech, we'll see a much more decisive budget, which will really get the right balance in this regard. And we have made proposals to government at NEDLAC to say how can we assist as labour, as a civil society to try to address these concerns. Chair, in the appendixes we just attached for members' information's sake are proposals around economic and social relief. There's more on the appropriation allocations, revenue as well, and the SOEs too, but those really fall more under the appropriation bill, which we'll discuss in the next hearings, Chair. So let me stop there, Chair, and thanks to members to give us space. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for the submission. Members and colleagues, maybe I must indicate that Cosatu was the last stakeholder to make a presentation. We have received written submissions from Budget Justice Coalition and Western Cape Commissioner for Children. Those submissions will also be considered. It must not be that because they are not here, they will not be considered. And also maybe before I give to members, we must note the submissions also made by Amandla Mobi on the issues related or the recommendations related to the tax issues. The recommendations, I think it goes straight to the Committee of Finance as they are also busy with their tax bills. And lucky enough, the same members of the Committee on Appropriations are the same members that sit in the same Committee of Finance, led by Honorable Ndlovu as the chairperson. Members, I'm going to note hands that would want to seek clarity on presentations that have been made. Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Majola, Honorable Ndlovu, Honorable Brett, Honorable Swartz, Honorable Ryder, and Honorable Umano. In that order, colleagues.
No, thank you, Chair. Let me also welcome the presentation, Chair. Chairperson, I think the first four presenters, there's one thing in common from all four of them: education. That one I picked up. All of them are speaking in the same voice about education, and I don't have any clarity-seeking questions, but to say that education is one of the most fundamental things that we need in South Africa. Failed educational system, it means that there's nothing that you can do. But I would also like to check any body that is here or any sector that is here that is willing to answer my question can answer, but I just want to check. ECD has been moved from private to the basic education. That's where it falls, and it comes with complications. When you go to these ECDs, especially the ones that are standalones, that are not on school premises, you'd find that they are complaining that they are not getting 100% exempted. They have to wait for the money, and if the money is not there, it means that they have to take the funds that come from parents who actually pay to look out for the salaries of the workers. And if the money is not enough, then it means that that money needs to cater for the children because the money from the department has not come in, which is one of the issues that they were complaining about. The second issue that they raised was the issue of now they've been pushed to go and study further. Some of these people are in their 55. They just decided to start a crèche. So most of these ECD started as a crèche, not even a daycare center, a crèche, like where you leave your child, the mother goes to school. Some of them never thought that they would find themselves in this. So how do you think, if you were to make a proposal to the Minister of Finance, how do you think that they can easily manage the issue of facing in ECDs, especially standalone ECDs, in such a manner that they don't suffer at the end of the day? Because some of them say that they have to wait for a longer period for the money to come. And they'll be sent from pillar to post. If you don't know the right person to speak to in the department, it becomes a problem. So if the minister were there, what advice would you have said to say, Minister, we've got a problem with ECD because we are concerned about ECD. If a child at the age of, you look at Chinese kids, at the age of 3, they can do so many things. Ours, they are still being taught how to write their names because the mother leaves in the morning, comes late in the afternoon from work, they are too tired, their first priority is to make supper and go to sleep. They don't even have time to look, and they leave in the morning around 5:30. You rely on the neighbor to check that the transport comes to take the child. So when they come, they don't even have. How can we better make ECD to work for us? I'm posing this question to you guys because all of you, I can see the passion that you have about education and especially ECD. Cosatu Master Parks. I'm going to touch on one issue because I think some of the other issues I've already asked in the Joint Standing Committee of Finance Management the joint committee meeting between Stand and Select. But there's one issue that you've mentioned today, which I think we also need to look into it. The taxi industry. There is no working relationship between government and the taxi industry, and it's a problem, especially in the Western Cape. You'd find a lot of taxis being impounded, and I'm not saying I'm promoting them not complying with the laws and the safety laws, but sometimes some of these people become so desperate because they don't know actually what are the reasons they do this. Their taxes are impounded. They do another one. They are fighting for the little piece of the pie of the transport industry. This side they have to fight with buses and taxis and Uber drivers, buses of government and Uber drivers and meter taxis, and here they also have to fight government pertaining that. And there's an issue that they are not budgeted for. They are still waiting for the money that they were promised to say, we are going to subsidize. I remember when it started, the CIA taxi issue to say, come, we'll buy your taxi, and then you have to buy it. Some of these people, those taxes are done. They haven't finished paying for those, which is a great concern. How can we heal the relationship, or how can we form a bridge to assist the taxi industry to be able actually to get both of them to come to an understanding, especially the role of government in assisting the people of the taxi industry? Because I think if we can find a common ground for government to actually listen to the pleas of the people that are in the taxi industry, then I don't think we are going to have all of these problems that we are having, whereby people are not abiding by the law, they are not complying according to labor. Some of them are evading tax because of the situation that they find themselves in. And it's frustrating because the taxi industry, just like the tuck shops in the location, that's one of the main sources of income or the easiest businesses that black people can make money from and ensure also employment of other people. But the lack of relationship between government and the industry itself is making the whole situation to be very difficult, especially with the bylaws that are forever being put in the Western Cape. It becomes, how can you resolve in such a manner that our people don't find themselves in danger of being, there are protests and strikes and everything, and people are going to find themselves in the danger of the whole thing. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Siwisa. Colleagues, let me take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of the chairperson of the NCO who has just joined us in this meeting. Welcome, Chairperson. I know maybe you were just passing, but it is an honor for us for you to come and spend a few minutes of your time with us. Honorable Majola.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I will share the same sentiment as the previous speaker with regards to a clear and informative request from the stakeholders. Mine will start from sharing the same sentiment or sharing the same motto from the Amandla, I think, where they indicated that the problem is clear. At the very same time, Madam Chair, the solutions are also clear.
I request that maybe you speak closer to the mic, Honorable Majola.
Amandla, Madam Chair, they further indicated that the inequality in South Africa has not shifted since 1994, whereas we know the problems, at the very same time we know the solutions. Madam Chair, well, that is a serious concern because one is not clear exactly, whereas we've got every solution, which are clear on this request. Amongst others is the issue of the economic growth, which led us into the unemployment. Madam Chair, it has been said by all the presenters that we seem to do a very little when it comes to that. But let me go straight to my question. One is directed to, it's part of the solutions, we know. It's directed to Ilifa Labantwana, where they've indicated that the importance of investing in ECD, which is very correct. Well, it's like when you build everything. I will make an example. When you build a house, you miss the foundation, definitely the entire roof, the entire house, including the roof, will not be what was been intended to come. So my question is with this 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 stages before we call a person, or when we can say a person can be able to be independent, standing for himself or herself. We said ECD, it's important. That's 0 to 3 here, but it's 0 to 5. You mentioned all the critical areas, nutrition, whatever, but your involvement with regards to ECD, it ends at that age. Whether the foundation with regards to ECD was correct, but do you went as far as following in when it is at a wall level, whether it's the same level, the same mixture of concrete? Do you follow it up to the roof stage? I mean, to the post-school age, whether what was invested during the earlyhood stage was not missed during preschool, during the up to the grade 12 level, up to post-school level. Then otherwise, no matter how fertile it's the earlyhood stage, but I doubt whether we will get the intended outcome if we just don't follow up with the following stages. The other one, Madam Chair, without repeating again what it's factual from Cosatu, there is nothing to say more about it. But I was just exactly as the previous speaker. My concern is on this 3 million we welcomed for formalizing the taxi industry. As a labor formation, well understanding that that sector of economy in terms of what it's contributing in terms of job creation, what is it contributing in terms of economic growth. But do you see, or do you have any involvement, or do you see those three sections that 3 million is intended to do? The complying with the labor regulations, taxes, tax laws, it might be VAT, if it's VAT, well, whatever law it will be imposed to the industry. And then the safe law, well, as much as you indicated that you do welcome the reprioritization of these three sections, but well, I'm sensing or I'm predicting the unspent on this one, unless if there is a clear plan as to how is it going to be implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Majola. Honorable Brett.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I note that 5 of the petitioners today in front of this selection committee falls under the umbrella of the Budget Justice Coalition. And the BJC is one of the institutions who submitted a written presentation. So that explains one of my questions and also answers one of my questions. That is all the touching points between these 5 petitioners. Ilifa made an interesting comment in their recommendations, bullet point 2 of their recommendations. They state the following: ask why the DBE has not yet announced plans to spend the 197 million rands allocated for an early nutrition pilot in 2024-2025, and ask for these funds to be spent in line with their intended purpose before the end of the financial year. This is a matter that caught my attention and caught my eye, and I will take it up. Just want to say that. In respect of the whole grouping of petitioners, just want to say I wish, I think many members of this committee wish it was this simplistic. Just to adopt a rights-based fiscal policy that prioritizes education, healthcare, investments, gender equality, and climate resilience, our job would have been much easier. But unfortunately, those are some factors in a basket. And that basket consists of expenses. And that must be balanced on the other side of the scale with the revenue. And what is eating up the revenue is the cost of debt. So I'm not going to question you on any of your submissions. I think many of your submission points is social matters, human matters, that nobody can contest and should agree with. You know, if you talk about children and the education of children, and once again, I also agree, we hear your passion for your topics. And I think to a large extent, we agree with your passion for your topics. And lastly, I want to welcome your passion. Society need people like you with a passion for these issues. But I think you also understand the reality of balancing the basket of expenses with a declining revenue side. And that complicates all our lives. Much more interesting to note, or equally interesting, is the presentation from Cosatu. Mr. Parks, I think you are just, or you are equally tired than us, because I was waiting for these statements from you, but it didn't come today. But you made a few interesting points, and I think one of the less controversial presentations to this committee, may I say. However, I do have a few issues that I want to highlight and want to raise with you. If I can just start my computer here. Let's see. I say my pen is incorrect, so I'm just going to... I have a few questions, not too many. On the issue of local government, you state the obvious, and I think we all agree with you, with the majority of points that you make. You raise an alarm, and we all agree with you. However, on local government, I would like to know, did Cosatu meet or engage with local municipalities? I just want to go down, scroll down my computer. There you are. And if you engage either with municipalities or with SALGA especially, how often do you engage with SALGA? The issue of employees that were not paid, did you raise it with SALGA? Did you raise it with the local municipalities? Then dysfunctional municipalities is a cause of concern for all of us. You very clearly have highlighted the municipalities with issues that are in distress, and that corresponds with our information thus far. Have you, as Cosatu, engaged with those struggling municipalities? Furthermore, Cosatu welcomes the progress in assisting struggling municipalities to pay their debts to ESCOM, and that, of course, is an area of grave concern for all of us. The rising debt to ESCOM. But I would love to hear Cosatu's views on the progress made with regards to the ESCOM debt relief and how municipalities are supposed to leverage from this relief to have the ESCOM debt resolved. The further issue that I would like to engage with Cosatu.
I am going to request that, colleagues, let's be reasonable when we ask questions. I'm not going to limit you, but just try to be short but
my
deep
last
into
one.
all issues we want to raise.
Madam Chair, this is an issue that I've raised in the House many times with different ministers, and would love to hear Cosatu's view on the DDM. District development model on page 12, you raised that. We are aware that the DDM was rolled out a couple of years ago, and especially Salga raised the issues that they've experienced with the DDM. Now going forward, and your proposal is that the DDM should be a roadmap. What is the basis of Cosatu's support of the DDM as a pivotal point moving forward? And that was my last question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bretz, Mr. Swartz, and Honorable Ndlovu. Kindly hold the photo for me while I step outside for a minute.
Honourable Chair, Lady, I'm not going to be long. I've listened very carefully to everyone who spoke and the passion that came through. But I think, you know, I'm now here since after the elections, and you know, we can listen and we can do, but and 2 or 3 presenters said that we need to, there's an opportunity to turn around the ship. From section 27 said it, Cosatu said we do not have endless time to turn around the ship. That says that we all know that we need to turn around. We came to that point where we can't go further on what we did for this past 30 how many years. We all know where we came from. We all know, you know, why are we here after 30 years? We all know it. But the problem is if I somewhere in my body feel so, we must admit before it can go better. I don't think we are honest with one another. We don't say to one another, the country can't afford. That's what's on your list. We need to have a turnaround. And the expectations that I've listened now, in how many meetings, the expectations from the people out there from the GNU, things need to be better tomorrow. We all know that the current budget was tabled and was put on paper by the 6th administration. And what I've said as the part of the GNU now, okay, the budget is there, but moving forward, we all need to come together in this country to come up with something brand new. Brand new. We need to come up with innovation of how we moving forward. How can stakeholders like people outside the government can come together with one list, not 100 lists? What's good for the people out there? We need to admit, and we need to steer this South African ship, the Titanic, away from where we are at this moment. And we do not have the endless time to do that. Because the reality out there, that is severe. We feel it. Poverty is worsening by the day.
it's our people, it's our brothers, our sisters, our children. But Ilifa, your passion, and that is where we need to start. And you know, it's so, if I as a person, it should have started 30, 40 years ago, where we should have started to invest, and that is that angle that I saw on the court. If we want to come out from the bottom and get our people up to the top, need to start invest in our children, in ECDs. And what I've heard from Amandla is the opposite. But because we didn't do what we should have done 34 years ago, we are there now. The social ills and the problems in our country is too big. Poverty is now there. We do need the grants, but grants are not sustainable. We need to skill our people. And that is where we need to start. And we can do everything, we can say anything, and that's why I've got a list of questions that I want to ask. But I think we need at this stage in our country, we need to come together, we need to coordinate, we need to tell one another there is not money. We keep this taps running, we keep the country running with money that we borrow. And it's expensive. Are we aware what we pay on the debt that we need to borrow it until 2027, 2028? And we expected the ship to turn around now. It's not going to be overnight, not going to be a year, not going to be 2 years. People in government, whether the politicians and the administration, we need to admit that we have problems in this country, and the people from outside, the voters told us, you need to innovate, you need to come to the table as leadership of this country. There's no other way. You need to work together. It's two edges better than one. But as you see, you can look, the normal people from outside, sitting, watching TV, watching news, looking from outside inside, our leaders in government, where we sort of sit around tables to come up with ideas, innovation ideas to take our country forward. We fight one another every single day, as if we're not worried about hungry people out there. And my plea is, Honourable Chair, is that we as the leaders, after 30 years of democracy, and that is not what we fought for, we need to go down and see what the realities are in informal settlements, the poorest of the poor. But the problem is, what do we say as South Africans, as leadership? Is it South Africa first, or is it Africa first? Because within the borders of our country, we deliver municipal service to people not paying for the services. We've got children in our classes who are not, from where they are from outside. So what I said, we need to come together. Is it South Africa first, or is it Africa first? And Cosatu was right, which said, but besides SOEs, I don't know when we will sort out the SOEs, but then what happened to the municipalities in our country, where the services need to be done? And 90% of 85% of the municipalities are all bankrupt. So Cosatu's plea of the investing in wages, we need to invest in developing and capacitating the people who are there. That is where we need to do. So Lady Chair, I'm gonna stop there first. But that is just a clear message that I need to put out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swartz, Mr. Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, honourable members. First of all, appreciation to the presenters. I know that lots of time goes into putting these things together, and sometimes it's daunting coming. It's really nice to have everyone here face to face. Ms. Siopa, I think you have presented to us 5 or 6 times, but it's the first time I'm seeing you with my eyes. So, yeah, welcome. It's very nice. I think that if one looks at the agenda, we have to discuss, we have a public hearing on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. And it's quite hard to get to the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill topics because I think the manipulation of the opportunity by the civil society representatives has been fairly substantial, where they've sort of gone into fiscal policy issues, gone into tax issues and so on. So good luck to the report writers. I think you're going to have some serious filtering to do to get through to the nub. But I'm going to follow the same thing and maybe ask some questions that are not necessarily relevant to the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill and perhaps just respond to some of the presentations. But there will be some questions that relate to it. But there's not a lot that came out on DORAB, and understanding that the Division of Revenue is quite limited. It's limited by the PFMA. And again, we're finding ourselves in a fairly tight fiscal corner with not much room to maneuver. So let's start, I think, with Ilifa Labantwana. And really, I enjoyed some of what you said. And you'll find most people will find it very difficult to disagree with any of your inputs. The concern that I have, and perhaps this is an email response and not one for now, is it relates to how to make it easier for government to spend money on ECD because of the fact that it is so difficult. It's such a difficult space for government to get into. And let me expound perhaps on what I'm saying. There was an article some years ago which spoke profoundly to me, and it was by an ECD centre run in Sebokeng, which is my space. And the crux of the matter was effectively the owner of the ECD was saying, don't bring your sentence standards to Sebokeng, okay, in terms of childcare. And the reality is that if you look at an ECD centre in Sebokeng versus an ECD in Sandton, there's stark differences and different standards held by the parents. Those lives are no less precious. Let's be very honest about that. And local government, particularly in terms of some of their funding models, and that's where I come from, so it's what I know, local government finds it difficult to spend money because of the potential legal liability that's associated with being involved with I don't want to call it a fly-by-night, but let's call it an emerging type of ECD. What is your solution for government to follow in terms of that? Finding a way to protect children, but also recognize that we have got different sets of circumstances and there cannot be a one-size-fits-all. So again, nothing to do with DORA, perhaps an email response, but I'd love some of your thoughts. Amandla Mobi, thank you very much. I think that you and I have differed for many years about the health promotions levy and the impact that the health promotions levy has on small-scale rural farmers, subsistence farmers in KwaZulu-Natal. And I think I invited you to go there and see for yourself last year. I wonder if you have. If I can then maybe talk about, Section 27. Again, and this is a general comment on Section 27 and not necessarily aimed specifically at you, but you rushed over your recommendations. And honestly, to civil society, that's what we're hoping to see, is that, what are your solutions? What are your proposed solutions that we can look towards implementing in time? It doesn't help to come and sit here and say, we want more money. I mean, I also want more money. I'll ask the boss perhaps for some more money. No. But But the reality is there's a finite budget, and we're still busy paying off the drunk uncle's credit card. That's the reality. So there's give and take. And I mean, let's be very frank and honest, Ilifa Labantwana was making a case for more money at ECD. Amandla Mobi was wanting more money for grants, okay? Those are competing interests, okay? Which one should get the money? Okay, who's going to, I mean, we're going to have an arm wrestle or a dance-off, I'm not sure. So please, if I can ask that, yeah, you do make your recommendations and make them plain and clear to us. Section 27, I want to disagree with you a little bit on the direct versus indirect grant, on the infrastructure backlog, education infrastructure backlog. In my view, combining the basic education infrastructure and the infrastructure backlog grant into one removes the focus of that backlog, okay? And suddenly the small amount, relatively small amount that's allocated to deal with the backlog suddenly gets subsumed into the big thing, and then non-performance can go unremarked on and unspotted and unseen. So while that grant stands alone, okay, it means that we can have oversight over it. It means we can see what on earth is government doing with this backlog. Changing from direct to indirect, we are the lawmakers. Surely that power lies with us. We don't have to collapse two grants into each other to achieve that. We can just sign a piece of paper that says this is no longer a direct grant. Let's move it to an indirect grant and shift it from where it sits in the budget. You know, that to me would be a better plan. I don't agree with the solution that Treasury is giving. I don't buy the story that they're giving us, and I think that you are maybe giving them too much of an easy ride. That's my soapbox moment. Cosatu, Mr. Parks, the wage bill. We agree more than we disagree, and I think that realistically, you as well don't like the millionaire managers. We believe that there should be more people on frontline service delivery. However, we also believe that the average remuneration of a state employee has escalated far beyond that of someone in the private sector. One of the reasons for that is, of course, the toxicity that exists in the public sector, and the fact that you know, many people need danger pay to come to work in their government office, but it's not always a nice place to work. We can't address that by just upping the salary every year. We should address the environment and deal with the toxicity there. But fewer millionaire managers drinking coffee outside meetings, and far more people on frontline service delivery. That's the way to resolve the wage bill, and not by ultimately cutting service delivery. You spoke about local government, and I think the funding model was picked up by a number of people. It's blatantly obvious the funding model definitely needs a review. We're all in agreement, and Treasury is in agreement as well. It would just be gratifying if there could be a little more urgency on that, I think. You also picked on the Eskom debt issue. I do want to just draw your attention to the MTBPS document, and I think it's page 11. I don't have it in front of me. It's either page 9 or 11, where it does detail the fact that Treasury is accepting the fact that the Eskom debt relief is not working for all municipalities. There is some backlog, and they are committing to doing a review on that, which is most welcome, because I think the fact again is that to have a municipality that is mandated and constitutionally so to perform service delivery, and then force them to pay back legacy debt in the billions in some instances, and I think most people know my relationships with Mfuleni. So in the billions, paying back that legacy debt to Eskom, there's just no ways they're going to catch it up in the medium term, and there needs to be a different solution. I do believe that, and I can't remember who picked up the point, but said that, you know, giving Eskom bailouts, but not bailing out local government might be a little bit silly. Bailing out Eskom via local government, that might be something that's worth looking into. But yeah, Chair, thank you very much. I've spoken too long already.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. Honorable Ndlovu.
No, thanks, Chairperson. Let me also join honorable members in welcoming the presentation. And I must also indicate that it's very interesting to also meet some of the stakeholders that we met last time when we were with the Standing Committee on Finance, like Cosatu and Amandla movie. Others are the first time that we meet you. So we hope that it will not be the first time I hear some members like Honorable Riders continuously saying it's not the first time meeting you. So we hope that even ourselves one day will be saying the same. I don't want to waste time, Chair, because I believe that most of the members here, they've raised a lot of issues with regard to the presentation from your side. I only have one from Cosatu that I will also want to ask Comrade Parks. Whilst the committees note the efforts by government to address issues of youth employment, what is Cosatu's view around the performance of the current presidential youth employment programs? Whether the program is targeting the right sector and what specific MTF projection could be suggested to achieve jobs creation and absorb new labor market entrants. So I don't want to waste time, Chair, because most of the honourable members have raised lots of questions that I wanted to raise. Thanks.
Chair.
You may, Honorable Mbalo.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Chair, and greetings to your good self and all those who have presented here. Thank you very much for the presentation. It talks to our daily living, what is really happening on the ground, because you touch on the issue of education, where you touch on the issue of ECDs, because really, if ever as a nation we are not investing in our kids, we are not going to the right direction, because our kids are the future. So, but according to the issue of ECDs, I think there's a gap there in terms of coordination. Like one of my honorable members said that you can see someone who is just not working, so he's decide on having a crash and just collect kids from where the nearby area and then you put them in one place. I think we as NGOs, we must be able to come up with a framework of assisting, because really there's no coordination. It's just I don't know how to say mengelmos of some kind, which is not bearing the right fruit that we want from our kids. Chairperson, on the other issue is the issue of Cosatu. My Cosatu, Chairperson, the issue of the two-pot system. What is your view? Are these two-pot system maybe releasing the distress of our workers? Because in most area, the main aim was to make sure that we relieve them some of the distress, because we will be working for many years and not getting anything, and maybe we want to do something with the little that we are getting. So what is your view? Is the two-pot system moving to the right direction of assisting, or it has assisted our workers? Number two, you talk about the issue of the vacant position. Meanwhile, every day they said the government said the system is bloated. It's saving a lot of people. Here we are saying the vacancies of around 700. I think it's 1,000. So I think this is two different statements which does not talk one language. You must maybe have a way of explaining to us, because in terms of we know that there are in most municipalities the salary bill is beyond. It's more than that's it's supposed to be. So the other issue, I think the funding model of local government, they've already explained that it need to be reviewed so that it can meet the issue of service delivery to its lot. I hear the issue of sugar tax. I know it was introduced last. I don't know along the way it just disappeared from thin air. So I think there must be a matter so that we can be able to revive the issue of sugar tax. What is the other issue which I wanted to? Chairperson, I think we have covered. We can talk up until tomorrow, but in terms of local government, we note the discrepancies within local government to say that where there are a lot of things that need to be looked at and be able to be corrected, so that if ever they say government is performing, it really they are referring to local government. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I have noted that most of the submissions made by members were more of comments than clarity-seeking questions. I'm going to give to each stakeholder 3 minutes to respond to the submissions made by members, and also request that within that 3 minutes, combine your responses with your closing remarks as we are going towards the end of our meeting. I will start with Ilifa Labantwana.
Okay, thanks very much for the engagement and the questions. We'll be as quick as we can in responding. Yeah, look, just to Honourable Suisa, in terms of ECDs not getting paid, I think there's three kind of things I would say about what's happening there, and we're seeing this particularly in the Eastern, in KZN, and potentially a court case being taken up there with the centres not getting paid, even though they've got signed agreements with the Department of Education. So one of the issues is the capacity issue at the provincial level. Like you said, it's switched from social development to education. Most of the social development work has moved across, but we are trying to expand access to the subsidy, but there isn't the human resources to actually do the financial monitoring, sign the SLAs, and actually manage a sort of bigger ECD system. So that's one of the issues. We need the provincial human resources. Another one is the data systems aren't in place, and so there's not a good data system for recording where the ECDs are, you know, what contracts they've got, how much they've got to get paid. So we're supporting the DB in the development of eCares, which is an ECD data system. That also needs funding in the budget, and the budget requirement for that ECD system is about 181 million rand over 3 years, not currently funded in the budget. And then the third thing is just more budget. In KZN, they've got more demand for ECD subsidies than the budget is allowing. And so in that situation, you end up with potential for a department to call for applications from ECDs for funding, and is overwhelmed by the demand and then can't pay everyone. So it's something which is very important to look into, and those are some of the reasons. Yeah, I think it's very important. I agree we focus on the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, just responding to kind of that issue, and I think the thing we did raise is around the provincial equitable share, and I think that is something to look at. And I'm trying to deal with a few different questions together. You know, on the question of how can we innovate and what can we do that's new, maybe one of the things we can try and do that's new is seek amendments to the budget where we disagree, where we don't actually believe there should be this funding cut, or if we think that there should be more money for this grant or less money for this grant. Let's actually take that up as MPs, as Parliament. Let's ask Treasury harder questions that we've done in the past about, you know, why the ship needs turning around, because the budget plays a really important role in setting the direction of the ship. So that's one thing we could do. And then just on the question of resources, there's not enough money. I think that given the demands that we have for better services, we have, you know, everyone that wants to see more development has to have some answers to two questions. One is, where can we do things better? You know, where's the savings? Where can we actually do things better? And the other is, how can we get more public investment? How can we get more resources? Because we do have resources, but we know that they're incredibly unequally allocated. And here in Cape Town, you can literally drive in 15 minutes from one of the wealthiest communities in the country to one of the poorest. That's the problem of inequality. We have resources, and I think that we can't just say that we're already spending enough. We can't spend any more. We have to look at where we can get the savings, but we also have to look at where can we get the resources. I'll just let Liz answer a question as well.
Okay, so in terms of when we talk about ECD, I think we tend to fixate on the education aspect alone. It tends to be broader than just education aspect, right? Early learning. So it encompasses a whole lot of other areas that makes a child a human being and a productive member of society. So it's not just about the learning. Learning is just an aspect of it. But if we are even focusing on that alone, we do realize that the system is not strong enough to accommodate all the children that we are trying to push through. And so we have a need for these uncoordinated, informal creches and home-based programs to support the public system, because we can't expect government to do everything, right? And that is one of the challenges and one of the ways we also need to invest in strengthening the system if we are going with the analogy of building a strong foundation. So we need to assist in, registering and bringing coordination to the sector and help and invest in professionalizing the sector. And professionalization does not necessarily mean it has to be a university degree. So training and development can come in different forms, but the point is that in terms of making it more coordinated as well, we want access to be expanded, but we don't just want numbers only, we want quality. So when we look at most of the problems we are seeing in post-school education, in the basic education sector, high youth unemployment, essentially what we are saying is that our foundation is broken, and what we are fixing at the tail end of the process is that we are putting a bandage on a bullet wound, if we can be that dramatic, right? And so the idea is that most of the interventions that the sector needs all require some sort of financial investment. And the time is now. We can't delay it. Otherwise, we are going to pay later on by doing damage control in addressing some of the issues that we could have addressed today. And we'll be happy to also send an email response on how we can make it easier. There are interventions in place with the DBE spearheading the Banapele registration framework to help register more centers, and also the ECAS, the data management tool, to be able to track and monitor to make proper informed decision and planning around some of the issues that we've raised today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amandla Mobi.
Thank you, Chair. I will be very short since we didn't really get any questions. Honorable Chair, I realize that even in a family there will always be differences, right? We will not always agree on things, we will not always agree about solutions, but what makes me really happy, and perhaps even the Amandla Mobi community happy, is that there is a sense of understanding that we do have issues in the country and everyone agrees that they need to be solved one way or the other. So with that being said, I do welcome all the comments, all the criticisms from honorable members, and hope that in the future we can continue in these engagements to come up with solutions that would just better lives for the people in South Africa. Thank you, Chair.
Is the mic on already? Cool. Yes, thank you, honourable members, for these questions. So I'll also be quite brief because it was more comments rather than clarity seeking. And also I'll be wearing two hats, Section 27 and the BJC, because there were comments about the Budget Justice Coalition. So I'll just quickly start by saying that the Budget Justice Coalition, yes, it is true that all of us in civil society have formed part of it. And, civil society is also even like politics. There are differences that different organizations have, but we hope that seeing us come together under a common cause for economic justice and budget justice, despite our differences can inspire governments in their coalition government. So we're a coalition of civil society. Maybe you can also do it in the same way. And then the next question or the comment was about innovative finance measures and solutions. And it also speaks to the recommendations, which I'll speak to now. So we're in full agreement that the issues are to do with revenue and economic growth. And we have spoken previously, maybe made submissions and done interviews and, spoken at length publicly about how we do need to answer that question of, our economy is not growing at the rate that it should be. This is a problem, and it has been a problem for a while, and it's not something that can change overnight. And also, we're in agreement that, maybe to answer that point, that yes, fiscal policy is really important, and our budget is so important in addressing this, but also just economic policy at large. So our fiscal policy needs to work with our industrial policy, needs to work with our monetary policy. They need to come together to better position the state to actually come up with these innovative financial measures. We also speak to debt servicing costs as a huge concern for us because we think that money should be going towards education, healthcare, ECD, social grants, and really just say that with the G20 coming up in this presidency, now's the opportunity to be exploring and for government and for parliament to put pressure on government and national treasury to explore alternative ways of solving some of these problems, be it our debt issue and our tax reform, not just for South Africa, because you'll see I think you'll find that it's not just us that are having this problem. In Kenya, they're protesting about austerity. Ghana is having their issues. Zambia, that there's a common struggle that countries in Africa and in the global south are having and that are constraining resource mobilization. But now's the opportunity to actually come up with solutions and explore the alternative solutions that even civil society have proposed in different submissions. So we've made submissions to the finance committees on the revenue side. We're just trying to keep to the theme of the division of revenue, looking at conditional grants, but we do speak to the revenue side and economic growth as an issue. And also just maybe the comment, the criticism which has taken while about how, as Section 27, how I rushed over the recommendations. That is true, and I think that the reason is probably because we have proposed these recommendations in front of this committee, and this committee has actually taken them up, and then they've been suggested. So, like gender-responsive budgeting, climate financing, human rights impact assessments. These are things that we've been saying for years. They've been taken to National Treasury, and then Treasury just postpones it. So it almost feels like we're saying the same thing over and over again. And so I think maybe that's why I rushed over it, because I didn't want to sound like a robot every single time saying the same thing. And then also just maybe to close off about the school infrastructure backlog grant, maybe I also rushed when I communicated that, because I don't think we disagree regarding that. I think we actually clearly highlight that the issue is still there. The reason why the SIBG was introduced, like whether they collapse it or whatever, doesn't take away from the necessity. And I think it came through a court order that national governments had to accelerate the eradication of pit latrines through the SIBG. But we really do say that this is also on the committee to hold National Treasury account. If Treasury's response to that is to run away and collapse the SIBG into the EIG, and you see this as a problem, well, I think that Parliament members should be holding their power to ask more and demand more of Treasury. We can demand more of Treasury, absolutely, but also so can the committee. And I think that I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I give to Equal Education on the virtual platform?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I've just realized that I had forgotten to actually turn on my video in the initial presentation. So for that reason, I'm just turning it on now. Chair, similarly to my colleagues, we of course note that many of the questions were broached broadly at the group. And so we don't intend either I don't intend either to repeat answers or to speak on comrades' behalf, even comrades who are part of the Budget Justice Coalition, as we are. But to speak briefly, I think, and in reflecting what our colleague from Amandla had said, that it's very positive to see the broad understanding and buy-in across this select committee of the fundamental importance of socioeconomic rights. If there's one thing I would really like to underscore here, it's that moving from that initial premise that there's an inherent ethical and constitutional and moral imperative to look after rights, I think it's equally important, especially in the context of budget analysis and budget considerations, that we also consider these socioeconomic rights not only as moral, ethical, and constitutional imperatives, and in fact, not only just as economic investments, but as economic investments which bear massive opportunity cost when they're not implemented. So as the honorable member mentioned, the people of this country in the results of our election absolutely have been calling for the country to be turned around. And the reality is, for the vast majority of the people in this country, the most frequent instances at which they interact with a state which is failing them, at which they interact with a state which is not meeting its obligations, whether fiscal or otherwise, is in the realization or lack thereof of socioeconomic rights. It's in people who are not able to access government services already before the budget cuts. It's in people who are not able to ensure that their children are able to receive a quality education, to receive quality healthcare, for example. And so I think it's very important that we frame this in the context of the people who are calling for a state to be turned around, and that part of that demand is not for services to get worse than they already are, which they will get in real terms. The reality is that even without budget cuts, stagnating funding on socioeconomic rights is a real-term decrease. But to have those services actively improved and ring-fenced and safeguarded. And then the second one, Chair, that I would say that's linked to that as well, is that the opportunity cost of not investing in socioeconomic rights, in not meeting the obligations that are created by legislation. And I really would like to emphasize here, Chair, that when we're speaking about the underfunding or lack of funding of grade R and ECD, especially in the context of Bella, this is not just a moral imperative. It is a direct legal obligation on Treasury that is created through the passing of this legislation. And it is incumbent upon Treasury to ensure that that funding is done, is made possible, and it's incumbent on Parliament to ensure that Treasury does so. But more broadly speaking, the opportunity cost of not investing in these socioeconomic rights is a debt. And I don't mean that in sort of a metaphorical or figurative way. It is a debt that we carry every year. It is a cost to our economy every year when we do not have a population that is able to access its education rights, its healthcare rights, its social protection rights. And the burden that we face on our economy is massive. It's also not one that we can defer. I think there's often a collective presumptive premise that when we're not spending sufficiently on socioeconomic rights, we're keeping those rights at a stagnant level. The reality is that when we don't spend sufficiently on socioeconomic rights, we're functionally decreasing the health of our population. We're functionally decreasing the education, the labor viability, the skill viability of our population. And so when we're speaking about the accumulation of debt, which we fully appreciate is necessary to service, although of course we do take issue with Treasury's insistence that there's no possibility of raising revenue other than through consequential increases in corporate tax if the economy continues to improve. Be that as it may, it's very important that we, not only as civil society, but as a room which I fully appreciate the members indicating is deeply appreciative of the importance of socioeconomic rights, view these not only as moral imperatives, but as massive risks to our national debt, to our national economy, to our national productivity, and to our health and safety if we don't fully implement. So, the recommendations that we've given very much echo many others by the Budget Justice Coalition, and they're linked there, and I know that my time is finished. So I won't repeat them, save to say that, of course, we're happy to continue to engage with members. But I would really like to emphasize here that this is not a matter of socioeconomic rights versus financial health or fiscal policy or fiscal health. This is a matter of socioeconomic rights being important in their own right and also being fundamental pillars of a future sustained fiscal health of this country and economic growth. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Over to you, Cosatu.
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks to members. Chair, I think just quickly to gallop. Chair, I think one of the issues in the Bell Act, which often is forgotten with all the debates around language, is that it now requires grade R to be a formal part of the school curriculum. And that's going to have a huge transformational impact. It's an investment in young people's educational career prospects. So it does mean that we're hopeful when the Minister said she's going to begin the rollout, that we can begin putting in place the resources to hire teachers, to build classrooms, etc. And in fact, I would love this Parliament to even be more provocative to say, make schooling up to grade 12 compulsory. Don't allow children to leave at the age of 15 because we're just creating a class of unemployed people with low skills, etc. Chair, on the issue of the taxi industry, look, to be fair to the taxi industry, is one of the few African and colored-led, black-led industry which survived apartheid. We should be given more support. We don't subsidize it unlike buses and trains and planes, etc., but we expect it to compete. And if you go to any township, any village, taxi industry is the backbone of public transport. But we do need to have a conversation that says that we'll give you support as a state, but then you abide by the tax laws, the labor laws, the road safety laws. We think there is a need for a social compact. We need to have the discussion. And we shouldn't be surprised, Chair, when taxi drivers, for example, drive like Michael Schumacher because they're given a task by the owner to deliver so much every day. If you can formalize and say, here's a minimum wage, here's the maximum hours, etc., we can transform it. Otherwise, Chair, we shouldn't complain when we see the violence erupting every few years, and it does happen. There is some discussion between Santaco, the Taxi Driver Workers Union, but we need to kind of give it support. Chair, I think on local government, I think we all agree with whichever matrix you take, it's a crisis. And I think it's one thing to fix ESCOM and transit and metro rail. Local government, I think, is much more complicated. And if you look at all the municipalities, it's beyond scary. It is dying. Some municipalities, they're too small. You can't have a, Prince Albert. It's just a one-street town. It's not sustainable. You need to consolidate. I don't think residents care about having a mayor from Prince Albert. What they care about is basic services. But if you don't do something, then it's going to get worse. So I think all of us, I don't think any of us has got the exact solution, but I think we all agree we need to have a discussion around a funding model. Otherwise, we can continue to intervene, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. There was an article yesterday, Chair, about Tsabotla. It's beyond scary. Chair, I think on the health promotion levy, in fact, that the Fifth Parliament did quite good work in forcing government, industry, and labour to have a discussion around a just transition. So you have the sugar master plan now, brings together key stakeholders. So trying to balance the health objectives, which are correct, which is obesity, diabetes, etc., but also to give support to emerging farmers, especially in Mpumalanga and KZN, who are largely African, giving support to localization, etc. Because in fact, the major threat to sugar, Chair, is cheap imports coming in from Brazil, from other countries. So we've advocated kind of a bit of a balanced approach to it. Chair, on the wage bill, look, the headcount ratio has declined. Number of kids versus teachers, number of police officers versus society, the gap is rising at alarming rates. The wage bill itself has declined from 35 to 31% in the last 2 years alone. And you can see, Chair, if you go to Home Affairs, you can't be surprised why there's long queues if you have a 60% vacancy rate. So I think our approach philosophically, Chair, is that society benefits from public services. If workers don't need to queue for 6 days at a time to get an ID document, it means they earn their wages for the 6 days. They don't lose it. It means the workplace where they work isn't disrupted by the loss of work hours. So we shouldn't take a shortcut that says just cut the state. When society, the economy, and businesses need a well-functioning state. So investing in the state, be it education or police, whatever it is, health, it actually benefits the economy. And I think also, Chair, it's always a difficult thing to compare private versus public sector. Private sector has 1 million farm workers. The state doesn't have one farm worker. The state has got police officers, it's got defense force personnel, etc. Nurses, doctors who are highly sought after. Chair, on the public employment programs, look, I think Treasury's made the correct call that we need to have a discussion. How can we bring these public employment programs together? Because some don't really provide what you want, like EPWP, CWP, etc. Some, like the YES program, the impact is too small. But some, like the presidential promise stimulus, have done good work, helping young people become teaching assistants, etc. But we need to have a single approach, maybe a bit of a hybrid approach, But if you really want to ensure that you're saving on administrative costs, you're producing the skills, the experience you need to find long-term employment, we need to have that discussion. But I think also, Chair, if you look at the SETAs, who sit on a huge amount of money, the amount of corruption there, it's unbelievable. It's industrial scale. Yet at the same time, the state is struggling for resources, so we need to have that holistic discussion. Chair, just getting towards the end, on the two-part reform, that was a Cosatu initiative. I'm sure Honourable Ryder cannot count how many times we had this discussion in the previous Parliament around it. But it was a rare occasion of consensus amongst party lines, amongst government, business and labour. It's been a success. We've had about 35 billion rand by last week Friday, reaching about 2 million workers. We've made proposals to the Finance Committee about the next round of reforms around greater relief, around boosting savings, making sure workers, when they lose their jobs, have access to the fees, the tax burden, etc. So we're hopeful that, and we want to squeeze Treasury. Let's begin the next round of reforms, because it is a positive impact. It's also a benefit of the state too, with additional revenues. It's a benefit of the economy, with additional stimulus in the economy, etc. But I think, Chair, just lastly, on the kind of the way forward, look, I think we all agree that you must manage the debt. The growth in debt is scary. But I think for us it's about the solution, which is fixing the state to provide the service the economy requires, about growing the economy, about reducing unemployment. So you have to deal with the hard issues, not defer them. You can cut the wage bill, etc., but you're not resolving the fundamental economic obstacles. And look, Chair, I think to be fair to the government, we have seen progress. We've seen progress around ESCOM. We have not had load shedding for 6 months. We've seen Transnet being stabilized. We've seen metro rail lines being reopened. I think Honourable Brits mentioned SARS. SARS shows you a roadmap to fix the state. You employ competent management, you remove corrupt criminal elements, you fill critical vacancies, you invest in the infrastructure capacity of the state. SARS is now delivering. It's improved tax compliance from 61% to 64%. We should be saying how to give SARS more resources to boost tax compliance, because that means the state's got money to fund nurses, teachers, got money to fund the debt, etc. But we can see the progress, Chair, but we just need to do it much faster. But I think also, Chair, it's about low-hanging fruits as well to build confidence of society. So if the Minister of Home Affairs is able to achieve his objectives, that will be a beneficial impact to society, to businesses, to investment, etc. I think lastly, Chair, we should have a discussion. The Honourable Brits is right. I think Honourable Brits is what I said it. We should have a discussion about the amount we spend on social grants versus the amount we spend on industrial financing, about job creation, etc. Because ultimately, you want to reverse the ratio of people on social grants, which is 27 million, versus those who are employed, which is 16 million. But in the meantime, you do need this intervention. Chair, look, lastly, Chair, we are optimistic as Cosatu. We have seen the green shoots, but it's about exploiting them, but also about government moving with much greater speed. And I think also, to be fair to government, it's about the private sector too, because the state can't do everything. The private sector must be paying workers a living wage so they can buy the goods we produce. They'd also be saying, how do they give solidarity to local companies, SMEs, by buying locally produced goods? Because the state can do so much, and the private sector too must also come to the party. But yeah, let me stop there, Chair. I'm sure I've abused your 3 minutes hospitality by far. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Let me take this opportunity to thank honourable members that ensured that this meeting takes place as planned. And I also want to thank all the stakeholders, both on the virtual platform and in the House with us, for such important submissions you made to us today. The presence of the National Treasury, I hope you were able to note and record all submissions that were made by stakeholders today. Colleagues, I, on behalf of the committee, believes that this is the only platform where different sectors in the society comes together and also find an opportunity to express their views on the government policy proposals affecting the lives of themselves and those that they are representing. And I must honestly say that as a committee, or as this committee, on behalf of members, we don't take for granted such kind of meetings or public participation, because we believe that it must not only be done as a formality, but it is a meaningful process where we take into consideration the lives of our people, especially the poor and those that really live in rural areas, both young and old. So your presence will not be taken for granted. Yes, several issues were raised today. Issues that came up into the meeting strongly are issues including the social relief of distress grant, the basic income grant, support of ECD infrastructure and subsidy, the correlation between the rising food prices and social grant increases, the gender responsive budgeting, the reduction of health and conditional grants, and many other issues, not forgetting the municipal debt to ESCOM. So, colleagues, I believe that we honestly take cognizance of all the submissions that were made today, and to you stakeholders, never think that we do not take you for granted. And the interactions also assist members in doing their oversight, because honestly speaking, we are here representing not ourselves and not only our parties, but the people that elected us to be where we are today. I think we will meet again on the 6th of December with the stakeholders, as we will be dealing with the adjustment appropriations bill. For now, the support staff, your efforts will never go unnoticed. Thank you very much, colleagues, and this brings us to the end of our meeting till we meet again on the 6th. Thank you very much.